Good evening. Welcome to the Wakefield School Committee meeting of Tuesday, December 10th. We'd like to call the meeting to order, and we will begin, as usual, with our Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll also begin with the reading of our mission statement, which is the vision of the Wakefield Public Schools is to graduate students who are confident, lifelong learners, who are respectful and caring members of their community. Our mission is to prepare students for college, career, and community by providing a rich and challenging curriculum, high-quality instruction, and educational experiences that meet their individual needs and interests. Agenda item 4 would be public comment, and that would be for anyone that was in studio or joining us virtually. And seeing... We may have somebody for public. Okay. If we don't have public comment in studio, is there anyone on Zoom? No? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on. Item number 5, I believe tonight we have a consent agenda.
Move that the school committee accept the minutes of the November 18th, 2024 Policy and Communication Subcommittee meeting as presented, and the December 2nd, 2024 Policy and Communication Subcommittee meeting presented.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and Melissa as well. Thank you, Melissa. Unanimous. Moving on to item number 6, I believe we have some budget items. Ms. Bufagna?
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight you have the financial reports in front of you from July 1st, 2024 through November 30th, 2024. We're almost halfway through the year. As you can see, the available balance is just about $4 million. We have about 7.7% remaining. We are still monitoring our encumbrances as we're approaching the halfway mark, working with schools and department heads about making sure that all their encumbrances are in place for the halfway point. The next page 2, you'll see for our grants, mostly are encumbered. As you'll see, most of them were in place from October, our entitlement grants, as well as our METCO grant. We do have some vacancies still in the METCO program, which we'll be reevaluating as we're preparing for next year. The last page is the revolving accounts. As you can see, the revolving account balances are still, they're coming quite down from last year at this time. We do have some amounts that we are looking to spend down as we have some purchases to be made from these accounts. So does anyone have any questions for these reports through November 30th?
I don't believe so. Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have a motion for the 2 payrolls for the month of November.
Move that the school committee approve payroll warrants number 20 and number 22 as presented.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor? Thank you, Melissa. That is unanimous. And Christine, is that all?
That's it. We have no gifts tonight.
Okay. Thank you so much. Dr. Lyons.
Before I get started, if it's okay with the chair, could we hear from our student ambassadors?
Yes, please.
I believe we have students on. I'm wondering if you could kind of introduce yourselves and give your update.
Hi, can you hear us?
We can.
I'm Alala.
Good evening, Ala. I think you're muted. Nope. Want to try now?
Nope, still can't hear you.
Ala, could you start?
So, Wakefield Memorial High School is hosting a virtual financial aid night for parents this coming Thursday, 7 to 8 on Zoom, and details can be found in Principal McLeod's weekly update. And then this week we have NEASC visiting, and me and Maya, we're going to talk about how we gave them a tour, and it went really well, similar to the tour that we did to you guys a couple weeks ago. And they asked us questions, and we went into some classrooms, and I think they're still here. They were here today, and tomorrow is their last day. And then Maya was going to share about our athletic updates, but I don't know if the microphone's.
Well, we have the
so
athletic director here on it today, so we can.
We might get some
We can get an
updates.
update too. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Okay.
Any questions for our student advisors?
Are you guys ready for break?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
All right, thank you.
It's much appreciated. See you soon.
Good night, thank you.
Next, with the permission of the chair, I'd like to just give an update and then invite to the table our athletic director, our assistant AD, along with Tom Brank, our director of fine and performing arts. So just a quick update. I'll point it out. We have a NEASC visiting team here for the decennial visit, and so they were here 2 years ago for their collaborative conference, is what they call it. So they're here to get an update on what has progressed in terms of our goal setting. One of the big questions was, the progress that we were making in regard to construction. From the time they were here last, 2 years ago until now, they can see the progress that we've made. Tomorrow will be their last day. They will submit a report to us in a couple weeks, and when that report is submitted, we will invite the high school administration to come and summarize that report for school committee.
Great.
But I can report so far, Kara has done a great job with the curriculum coordinators and meeting with the NEASC team. We've gotten some very favorable feedback from the visiting team. One of the co-chairs is a retired principal, middle and high principal. He's in a school with grades 7 through 12 from Northampton, Mass. Do I have that right? And he's now working with NEASC, and just favorable feedback from our initial meeting this morning. But they've been in classes, they're attended a faculty meeting, they're interacting with the curriculum coordinators and department heads, and so there'll be more to follow on that. I also don't want to miss the opportunity to give special thanks to our art department, to Caitlin, Morgan, and Meg, of course, to say thank you for all of the work that they're doing with student artists around decorating the downtown windows. And so that's really remarkably well received. Also, looking ahead to break, everyone I know, as the students mentioned, I think are looking forward to break. Adults are as well. And so it's a busy time of year. Before we go on break on December 20th, we will have what they call a topping off ceremony for construction, which is kind of a ceremonial event where they put the last piece of steel for the high school construction in place. And so that will take place on the morning of December 20th. So that's what's happening in the district. And so at this point, I'll give an HR update after we invite Mike, Danny, and Tom up to the table to talk about the work that they've been doing. Are you guys coming together, or? You pull up
See
with there.
everybody again.
You
Yeah.
too, Michael.
Thanks for coming.
Danny, thanks for joining.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for the invite.
First one ever, he said.
Ooh.
Yeah, so, again, nice to see everybody. Just from an athletic department standpoint, we just wanted to kind of, close up the fall. The winter season is off and running, so we just wanted to highlight You know, some of our team successes. We have some of our senior student athletes here that can kind of speak on behalf of their programs. And I think the last time I was here, I mentioned Danny by name and just said, you know, as I got started in my role, he's kind of the behind-the-scenes guy doing all of the things. So I would just like to echo that point again in front of him, that it's unbelievable to have someone like Danny down in athletics that just, you know, handles everything that nobody thinks of. You know, I think our student athletes would say the same thing, whether it's about a uniform, you know, a busing issue for our coaches, but he's the guy to kind of get things done. From a fall standpoint, we had just over 362 student athletes for the fall season, which was a great number to have. Of those, again, in no particular order, we had 34 Middlesex Freedom League all-conference or all-star selections. That included 2 players of the year for us in boys and girls soccer for Jack Millward and then Eliza Margolis. They both got player of the year in their respective sport. We had a state champion team, our 2024 dance team, which is, they'll have you know, the back-to-back state champions, was a huge highlight. 4 league champions by my math. Football on Thanksgiving after their win got a piece of the league title. Boys soccer made a state tournament run all the way to the Final Four. Boys cross country, who's represented here tonight, was a league champ, and they were second in Division II, and they qualified for the entire state. And then our golf program, who was a Division II North Sectional champion for the first time ever, and Pat Maloney, who's a sophomore, was the Middlesex League champion in the individual category. So, and then one more highlight that we just had, or that I enjoyed, probably personally a little too much, but was the pep rally that we had on Wednesday, November 27th. It was just something to kind of to bring the whole school community together. I'd like to say we went nuts for an hour. So I wore an old baseball jersey and a headband, but whatever. So that was really fun. It's something to build on. I do have background checks if needed for that.
We have
those,
some pictures.
Yeah, those are the highlights. And then again, for winter registrations, just one thing that we wanted to mention was we're up to 327 registered athletes, which is, about
50 more than last year.
50 or so more than last winter. I think they're all on the track team, but neither here nor there. Questions for me or Danny individually, or if you don't, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, welcome, Danny. We've heard your name many times. I had no idea who you were, but clearly you're a legend in this area, and just appreciate how you've helped Mike come on board, and it sounds like you've done a lot behind the scenes to make this a fairly seamless transition. So appreciate it on behalf of myself and the school.
Thank you for the invite. My staying hidden streak has finally ended. No longer behind the scenes, but no, I love giving back to the community and just helping out these kids the best way I can, staying behind the scenes, as you will, just being that backbone and support for everyone is all I want out of it. So, but thank you again for inviting me tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Kevin?
Just really briefly, the increase in students participating in athletics is great. You attribute it maybe to one team. Do you have any other kind of thoughts about that 50 student increase?
No, and I joke because our track numbers are through the roof.
Yeah.
I think we're up to probably close to 118, I
Wow.
think, for boys and girls track combined. But I think, I don't know, I think people just want to get involved. Again, whether it's trying out for a sport, whether it's trying a sport for the first time. And there's things that we can look at too, I think, as an athletic program kind of moving forward on what is it why are those trends happening, and how can we keep those programs growing or continue to support the other programs to grow,
That's fantastic.
So yeah, it's just good to see.
Yeah, that is great. That's probably a lot of work from coaches and staff.
A lot of work
things
for
like
Danny.
that. Yeah, and Danny. So thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
I will add, I see your cross-country runners out throughout town all the time. I mean, the amount of running they do is incredible. I can barely run from like my upstairs to my downstairs, and I see this whole crew running up and down the Han Street, Water Street. I mean, they're everywhere in town daily.
They run everywhere, and again, the construction stuff that I obviously am new to is just a challenge for them that they handle with stride. And there's no one better to talk about the cross-country team than, we'll start with our representatives from our boys cross-country team. We have Brandon and Andrew Nett here with us. You guys want to come on up? I'll get out of the way.
Hello.
Welcome.
So I think for a recap from our team, I think at the end of the season we had a great run, and I'd first start off with our Middlesex League. We got, for small school, we went undefeated, and at our league meet we went fourth, and we won out of all the small schools. And in that meet we also had, or over the whole season, we had 5 Freedom Division All-Stars, including Ethan Mezikowski, Devin DeBerardinis, George Palmer, and me and Andrew. And I think a lot of our success has come from our team's chemistry. And I think even though we run like all the time, we still manage to go out to eat like brothers all the time, and that's kind of what has led to our success.
When it comes to the postseason, we placed second at our 2B divisional meet, and then we placed third at our Division II state meet. And to kind of go off of him on our team, I think a lot of our success does come from commitment. We run year-round when it's 90 degrees or when it's 10 degrees, and especially with the construction outside without a track, I can thank our coach for most of it, but, you know, being a part of a team that's always motivating each other and pushing each other to our limits, I think that's what makes our team so successful.
You saw everybody running this afternoon. It was awesome.
It was raining.
It's really
so-
great to see.
Well, not really. It's just very muddy.
Yeah,
So.
Nicely done.
that's great.
Just really quickly, you mentioned all the running you do, and so certainly that contributes to your success. I was more interested in how eating at Brothers has helped, because I've certainly done that a lot, and just wondering how that can help. I'm kidding.
What's the secret?
Yeah, what's the secret? I
I mean-
have not enjoyed the running success from eating at Brothers, but congratulations, that's really amazing, and brings a lot of pride to the town, and certainly enjoy seeing all your accomplishments. And so, great job to you and to everyone on the team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so
to
much.
all of you.
Congratulations, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Please tell your mom we said hello.
And then just 2 more senior athletes. We have from our girls volleyball program, Sophia Anderson, and then from girls cross country, we have Lily Salee, who will be running cross country and track at George Washington University next year.
Brilliant.
Okay, I'll start just to echo what the net said. We had a great season this year. It's hard to come off of last year after winning the state and all-state title last year. We tried to come in and gain as much momentum as we could. But we ran well. We went undefeated for 4 meets. We ended up losing our last meet against Melrose, which was a tough one, but we ended up beating them the next week at the league meet, where we placed 4th and beat all of the small school teams there. At that meet, we gained 3 All-Stars and 1 All-Conference on our team. Grace Brackett was an All-Star, Liza Bankston was an All-Star, and then I was named to the Middlesex League All-Conference team. We had a really great run at states, where we placed 7th and qualified for the all-state meet the following weekend, where everyone was pretty tired, but we managed to finish strong there. We had a lot of new girls this year, which was exciting. Even just going into indoor track, we have like 5 new kids that are freshmen. So it's exciting to just get new kids, and we're just trying to keep growing the program as much as we can. We lost a lot of girls from last year, so coming into this year was kind of more of just like a rebuilding year. But morale was high, and we kept everything going. So it was a lot of fun.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm from the volleyball team. And going off Lily, what she said was like a rebuilding year. We lost some pretty like impactful seniors, so it was refreshing to know that like pretty much all our girls are coming back, who are like sophomores, juniors, and now seniors. And we quickly realized that like it was a year to kind of capitalize on that and not as much like rebuild, but try to capitalize and get as far as we could. We made it to the second round of the tournament, being beat by Weston again, but it's okay because it was a really fun game and we gave it our all. So we ended up with 2 All-Stars. One was Lila Arkansas. She was also our team MVP, and then I was the other All-Star. But I think our team has just grown so much, especially in the past 2 years. I want to like credit that like all to my coach because she puts her effort in like day in and day out, and especially the relationship between the freshmen, sophomores, junior, senior, like throughout the last couple of years, like the relationships have grown so strong and really fueled the program to get better.
Great.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
I would just say to sort of you two, and also to the Nets as well, being seniors in your sort of student athlete positions, your level of caliber and how you interact with some of the younger students, you're seeing like you're going to create a void when you go on, and you've seen the seniors ahead of you do that, and you're going to do that next. And the way you're sort of creating those relationships with the younger students is so important in that leadership role that you have. And you're doing it so splendidly, and you see it in the success of the team and your peers. And so just thank you for all of that hard work, not just in your sport, but also just being the leaders that you are in your groups. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good kids.
Tom, you ready? Or is it? Are you good, Mike? Okay, thank you.
Evening, Tom.
Good evening, everybody. Good to be back. Just want to echo first the conversation about Danny behind me. The athletic department and the performing arts department have always worked very tightly to share kids and to share space and to make everything work. And Danny's always been a great contact for me down in the office. And so I'm glad that he's finally getting to come out from behind and let people acknowledge his work, because he's wonderful to work with, and we appreciate him up in the music department as well, as I know the athletic department does.
Excuse me.
I just want to highlight, for a lot of our extracurricular activities, a lot of them are year-round. So I'll just a couple highlights around those, and then the ones that kind of went through the fall. Starting with our middle school theater program. They are deep in rehearsals for their production of Frozen Junior that will hit the stage at the end of January. And then we also had 4 students that represented the Galvin at the METG concert contest day at Norwood High School this past weekend, highlighted by Allie Knupp, who finished second place in the middle school musical theater contest, which there were over 50 kids that were part of that, and she finished second from around the state. And then in the high school theater department, you had an update recently from a couple students that were here in November talking about their Shakespearean production. We also had students participating in the METG competitions this past weekend. And they are well in rehearsals for their festival show and also their spring musical, which is Hadestown, and one of the first high schools in the country to be performing that. So they're excited to get rolling on that. The other big extracurricular activity group that's been working in the fall is Voices of Steel, our auditioned a cappella group. They've been performing all over the place. They've kind of become like the go-to for all the community groups and requests around, and they just keep taking the gigs. And it's great for them to get to sing, but it's also great for the community. So they had a fall fest in November. And in December, so far, they performed at all 4 elementary schools during the half days last week. They've been at Sweet Bay, the CNA tree lighting on the Common, the FPCC Pie Social, the Dole Bear Winter Wonderland, the Hartshorn House Holiday Tea, and they performed at Brightview last week. And then still to come tomorrow, they're singing at the Melrose Wakefield Hospital Light the Way event and the Lions Club Santa Arrival later in the week. And they also have their annual holiday a cappella show with the other a cappella group, Mic Drop, at the Albion Cultural Exchange on December 19th. Doors open at 4:15. Concert starts at 4:30 for anyone that would like to come and see them if you haven't already done so. And they're also, competition-wise, they're preparing for they were accepted into a competition called the One Voice A Cappella Invitational in Memphis, Tennessee in January. So over Martin Luther King weekend, they'll be going to Memphis to compete in a nationwide competition. And then they were one of 8 groups in New England accepted into the Any Voices competition the week we get back from Memphis, that weekend down in Plymouth. They'll be debuting their competition set in Wakefield at their a cappella night on January 30th, and where they perform with Mic Drop and the Galvin Middle School Chamber Group. And then they finish their competition season at their ICHSA performance on February 1st, which is whole New England, starts with whole New England, and you move on from there to semis and nationals. So they are very busy, but it's a lot of donating their time, especially this month, and it's great to see them out and around the community. The other big extracurricular activity in the fall that's now complete is our marching band. And I have representatives with me, behind me, from the bands, who will be able to answer questions if you have for them. But the Warrior Marching Band had their first undefeated season in school history this fall. They won all 7 of their competitions. They received a perfect score at the Massachusetts State Finals and ended their season with their 2nd consecutive New England Division V championship, receiving the highest score of the 29 competing bands, receiving a platinum medal along with awards for Best Percussion, Best Color Guard, Best Visual Performance, Best General Effect, and Best Music. And along the way during the season, they also broke their record for their food pantry collection. We always do a big collection for the food pantry in September at a rehearsal. And they passed the post office, and this year had the highest net collection for the food pantry. And then the winning section also got to go to Brothers, so maybe that had to do with our final success. We'll have to do some research into that.
Who did they go to Brothers
to
for?
see how Brothers affects all of these groups. It's an interesting, it's like free advertisement right now. So they, obviously had a fantastic season. So proud of them and the work that they put in from the beginning. It was a young group, only have 11 seniors in a band of 77. So they're, primed to continue their performance level, but it was a fantastic group. And with me, behind me, starting all the way to your left, Nick Wiedemeyer is our drum major. Zakiya Sivan is a section leader in the pit. Gwen Buckley is a section leader in the drum line, and Molly McGee, section leader in the drum line, all seniors who obviously were a huge in leadership and a huge part of our success for the season. So,
Back-to-back championships.
back-to-back.
Just clarifying.
Yeah. 2 in a row. That's all I got.
Amazing work.
I'll probably sound repetitive to things I've said in the past, but we do an amazing job with our music and performing arts department here. We can take it for granted and think that every school across the Commonwealth or across the country provides similar programming, and they really don't. So it is something very special we have here. I saw it myself last year. I went down to New Jersey, and you see yourself among the crew there. But even, when you're in the state, you just see how amazing and all the hard work that goes in, not just from the students, but also from all of our staff as well. And I think it's great because between our sports program and our visual and performing arts programs there's an opportunity for every kid to get involved in something. And, also, I think it's an opportunity, both we heard from our runners and other and volleyball athletes as well, but for the older kids to step up and serve as leaders to younger kids. And I think that's an opportunity that really just helps grow the program and I just appreciate, all the effort that both our staff puts in, and just seeing the output from our kids in both of these programs is really impressive.
And I would just like to highlight again, as I said at the beginning, it's, the adults have a lot to do with it, and a lot of it has to do with our ability to communicate and to understand, as we talk about trying to provide opportunities for kids. And, I think one of my biggest prides at this school is that, there isn't I don't feel like there's a band kid and there's a track kid and there's a theater kid. Like, we have kids that have the ability and the opportunities to do what they're passionate in. And just because you play a saxophone doesn't mean you can't play tennis. Doesn't mean you can't be on the math team. Doesn't mean you, we provide those opportunities for students. And it takes work because we all have high expectations. We take their time, but we make it work so that the students can participate in the passions and the desires that they have while they're in high school. And that's, again, it's a testament to the adults that promote that, and then the dedication of the students to make it work.
I will say my younger students see the marching band and how much work they put in. We can hear the marching band from our backyard. They hear them playing late at night, and they're a little apprehensive about, I'm trying to get them in marching band. I'm a marching band kid. I would love for them to pick something up. But they're trying to figure out if they're going to be fans or if they're going to be in it. But the students that sort of they meet in the community and that they talk to really tell them the other side of it, and which is the community that comes with it, the sort of that peer group, that high level of achievement that they achieve together is just, you're not going to get that anywhere else. And so that you put the hard days in, but what they get out of it is just something otherworldly, and they're a good advertisement for the program across all spaces.
They're great.
So thank you for putting in your time. Thank you for expecting high things and helping kids achieve it. Because it's one thing to expect it, but if you don't support it, and you and all the other adults support it, and that's what makes it, they need that to sort of get to that level that you're asking of them. So it's awesome to see them, everybody, like across the board. I had one question, which was the competition piece that the theater group is doing. Is that Minotaur?
For the
Theater.
The high school group?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I'm not sure what they ended up deciding on.
I thought it was another
Is it?
Greek thing.
Yeah,
Is it,
Molly says yes.
Is it Minotaur?
Molly says yes, and that's what it is.
Great. Yeah, we're going to try and see that too. My kids are wicked into Greek mythology. So, thank you across the board for everything that you guys do, and the way that feeds back into our community, because it's an asset for everybody. All the places you listed, everywhere from Sweet Bay to the schools to Brightfield, it's just crazy. So, thank you.
Want to add anything? Anyone want to sit next to me?
Yeah.
Come on up.
I'm Glenn. So, for me, I feel like marching band is more than just like playing an instrument. I've met so many, like even these people sitting behind me, like I would never thought to talk to these two, and now I'm like really close with them. I feel like for me, when we're mid-season, you stop and you don't think of the younger people as younger people, you just think of them as part of the marching band now, and I feel like that's why we're such a big family, because we just go through so much together, and we have 9-hour days sometimes, and we went away to Maine, and we sit in the sun, and march around for hours, but it's always tough, especially carrying a drum, because I'm in the drum line. But, it just puts us on the other side when we come out of it. We just bond. So it's very nice to just have those people.
Thanks, bud.
Brain.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Well said.
Nicely done.
Do you have plans for next year yet?
I do. Yeah,
Are they
one of
secret?
my closest friends. We are auditioning for a drum corps, which are one of our drum techs, Ian Hartman. He got us into, so hopefully I'm doing that over the summer. It's a very long thing, and it's more than just 9-hour days. It's like a whole thing over the summer, 11-hour days every single day. Traveling around the country. But that's something that I'm into, so.
Nice.
interesting.
Very cool.
You guys want to go?
Another thing I'd want to add is this season we had a phenomenal set of rookies, and the amount of people that really stepped up to their new jobs this year has been insane. Especially concerning like people on new instruments, there were like a really high amount of people this year that either like had their instrument switched or were in a new section, and people really put in the work, showing up every day to learn the music and the drill, and the effort this year is really what allowed us to be so successful.
Awesome.
Great. And when you say rookies, you're thinking, is it mostly 8th graders or also just other grades?
Typically, freshmen and 8th graders are the largest amount of rookies.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are like an increased amount of 8th graders this year compared to other years. I think they recently started letting them in the band like 2 or 3 years ago, and it's been very successful. The 8th graders have shown real strong maturity, and they've really incorporated themselves. I can't really tell the difference between the 8th graders and freshmen by the end of the season, to be honest.
You're a
That's
seasoned
great.
veteran now. That's just
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Something else I'd like to add, not just for the rookies who did a fantastic job adapting to the culture and the band, but also the section leaders who stepped up and really gave them guidance and allowed the band to really take in and take advantage of the numbers that we got to be able to really accomplish the great things we did this season.
It's great. It was a great show.
It felt really good to be able to walk up to basically anyone and strike up a conversation and know that they're interested in what you're doing and what you're interested in what they're doing, and being able to establish great rapport with everybody that way, the staff included.
Great.
Do you feel a bit like a celebrity now, or is it?
To be honest, really no. That's when you're out on the field, you're with everybody. Everyone's got a job, so it doesn't make sense to elevate one person because they have a fancy title or an extra special job.
Nick's the drum major, so he was the one
Yeah.
on the podium,
Right.
starting everything, working
Yeah.
tempo changes.
Yeah.
Gets the most of my wrath from the booth. Yeah. So
Great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Nick,
Nice
what
sit
instrument do you play when you're not the drum major?
Right now, I'm playing tuba in the wind ensemble and trombone in the jazz band.
Oh, nice. Great.
Thanks so much. Molly?
I'm Molly. And I just want to say that marching band has probably been one of the hardest, but also one of the greatest things that I've ever been a part of. Because you really have to work for like everything that you accomplish at the end, and it not only is like you're not working for yourself, but you're also working for the collective and for the whole. And you don't really like tell on the field, but like when you listen to the videos at like the end, you can like see how all the pieces come together and like how much like of a show that like you put on, because it's not just music, it's like visuals and dancing and color guard. So it's like there's emotion that you have to like bring to the audience, and it's really rewarding at the end of the season when you can see like where you started and like how you've come so far. So yeah.
That's awesome. Kevin?
I love hearing all of your stories. Just kind of reiterates how important the co-curricular and extracurricular is, because I think, hearing about your reflections, whether it's running or in the band, about all the learning you did, not just of an instrument, but leadership, working among others, problem solving, and just how important those skills are in other areas of your life, and how you can apply what you've been learning here and with your coaches, etc. and just how important, we're now hearing, potentially hundreds of students between the band and athletics that hopefully feel a sense of belonging, feel a little more connected to others, and again, just growing these really important skills. So I love hearing the stories and just kind of picking out all the things what you're talking about and the outcomes that you've achieved because of this participation, vis-a-vis, of course, everyone that's dedicated so much time to working with all of you. So it's a lot of pride, I think, for all of us. And as an alum, your success is talked about by those of us that have graduated a long time ago, but still pay attention, even though so many have kind of gone to other areas of the country, but we'll still post when there's success from the marching band because they were on marching band, or success of the various teams because they played on those teams. And so you never forget about those things, even though their lives have gone in other directions. So just really grateful for all your participation, grateful for the faculty and staff who've dedicated their time to it, and just really enjoyed having you here, and grateful for you sharing your stories.
Yeah. Dr. Lyons?
To the adults, to Tom Bankert, to Mike, and to Danny. Danny, there's no going back behind the curtain now. But to the adults, thank you for your time, your leadership. I think if we kind of broke your salary down by hour, you're probably making about $8 an hour. But we appreciate and recognize the time you put in. Mr. Bankert, I hope people in the community will be able to identify you now by face and not just by voice in the booth when we get calls and parents say, the gentleman who sounds like Bill Belichick, who's up at the field yelling, do it again. Now they can put a face with a name. But to the adults, thank you. And to the students, we're so proud of you. So proud of you. If there's anything that we can help you with while you're kind of moving through your senior year, please don't hesitate to ask any one of us at the district level or even any of the school committee as well. And so really, really pleased to hear you talk about your experiences. Thank you. Thank you. So,
Thank you.
so the good news is you can go now. If you'd like. You're more than welcome to stay. Thank you.
Merry Christmas, you guys.
This is such a fun meeting for us. It's just so great to hear it from students and their experience. Next up on my agenda, I'd like to continue to take the items out of order.
Sure.
And one of these days, we'll get it correct and get it in order.
What'll be the fun of that?
But this evening, we welcome two really remarkable teacher leaders to come and talk about kind of where we are with a district literacy update. I can turn it over to Kara.
Yep, I can jump in here. So tonight we have our K through 4 Humanities Curriculum Coordinator, Valerie Dryan, in here with us, and Margaret Messier, our 5 through 12 ELA Curriculum Coordinator. We just call this broadly a district literacy update, but we know there's interest from the committee to hear more about the work we're doing in writing as well as intervention. So that's kind of how we structured the presentation, and then of course we can answer any questions that you have along the way. This is just wanted to come back to this. Superintendent Lyons and I presented the district goals earlier in the year, and just wanted to highlight the rich and challenging curriculum goal that we put out in the beginning of the year, just to know that all our work really goes back to those goals, and we're trying to continue to chip away. And we feel like the information we'll present tonight reflects that, the work that we're making, the progress we're making towards this goal. We highlighted the last time we presented about our goals, just the work that has happened in the past year. We talked a lot about our ELA curriculum review that has gone over the course of the last couple years, and our 100% implementation of a new core literacy program at the elementary level, and the updated standards aligned curriculum guides at the secondary level. We also talked about the work we're doing in foundational skills in K through 2, and a big highlight on the secondary curriculum review was the training that all of our ELA and social studies teachers had in the Empower Writing program, which we're trying to make consistent across ELA and social studies classes 5 through 12. I'm going to pass this over to Val for the next slide.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for having us tonight. So just to kind of frame what we're about to talk about, there were 3 key shifts when the literacy standards went into effect. One was from strategy instruction to a shift toward more background knowledge building, from separate writing to more integrated writing, and from level text to more complex text. So tonight we really kind of focused on shift 2, the separate writing to integrated writing. And so Margaret and I are going to kind of give some background information about each of those levels. Next slide, please.
Oh, it's not switching.
Is it stuck?
I think it's
Oh,
stuck.
no, it was
there was
going.
effects. I'm sorry, I didn't realize the effects are so
Oh, all right.
No, they
Okay, there we go. Thanks, Val.
No worries. All right, so EL education is our core literacy program for K to 4. And so EL is grounded in that second shift, which emphasizes reading, writing, and speaking grounded in evidence from text. And this is both for literary text and informational text. And so basically that means that everything is grounded in a common text or topic, and this kind of connects to that background knowledge piece to ensure that there's an equitable access for all students, and that what they're writing about and what they're talking about and what they're reading about is not dependent on students' own individual experiences, because those can widely vary. So within the curriculum, all 3 types of writing that are addressed in the standards are addressed throughout the curriculum. So we have argumentative writing, which in grades K to 5 is referred to as opinion writing, informative and explanatory writing, and narrative writing. And so EL is really designed around the principles of writing for understanding, which means that students need to deeply understand a topic that they're writing about in order to use writing tools and writing structures effectively. So in EL, an example of narrative writing. So narrative writing is still emphasized with writing through evidence. So for example, in a kindergarten class in Module 2, students will read about weather and how that weather affects characters, and in stories such as The Snowy Day. So A Snowy Day has story is read to the whole class. There's a bunch of other stories that are read around that same topic, and then students write their own weather story for one of the unit assessments. As far as argumentative writing and opinion, an example of what you might see in EL for that is that, again, it's grounded in evidence, and that students are analyzing, they're not just taking an opinion on one side, they're analyzing both sides or perspectives. So an example of this in grade 1, module 4, students are writing opinion paragraphs about birds. The whole unit is about birds. And so they read about a hawk that nested in New York City, and that some people wanted that hawk nest removed because they didn't like having it and it was causing problems for them, and others wanted to have it and have it put back up. And so students write a paragraph focused on why the nest should stay and provide evidence about why people might have that opinion. And then the same process is used to talk about why the nest might go. So it's not just, their own opinion about it, but really looking at both sides. Next slide, please. And so where we are and where we're going in K to 4. So there was a heavy emphasis in year 1 in just understand, like getting through the first year of the curriculum, right? And getting to know it, that's a bit heavy lift as it is. But I think really that background knowledge piece was a big shift for us. So we focused a lot on the reading of complex texts, and we're still working on that shift and how to make it most accessible. But right now in writing, everyone is using the curriculum embedded assessments from EL in K to 4. In year 1, Margaret and I worked together with a group of teachers from grades 4 and 5, and we compared the alignment of the EL writing rubrics to the secondary writing rubrics that are in place in 5 to 12. And there was strong alignment between those, and we really took a look at those along with the standards with that group of teachers. This year, we built in additional writing practice opportunities in the grade 4 through a newly created All Block Light. All Block is one of the, it stands for Additional Language and Literacy. It's another part of the curriculum, but we took that with a group of our teacher leaders, our EL leaders, and really pulled out the pieces that were going to provide that additional practice for students that we felt was needing to be emphasized. In addition, our EL leader team is working on updated pacing guides where we're linking all the resources that were created throughout the year last year, such as the graphic organizers that are needed for the reading comprehension or the writing. And then we are continuing to build those resources this year and over the next few years to add in scaffolded graphic organizers as those are created. We're actually working with Emily Pat from STEAM Collaborative. I just had her in yesterday, and we're looking at building some more resources into our pacing guides to help with that, really the total participation pieces of the curriculum and highlighting those and helping teachers be able to implement those without having to read through a 20-page teacher manual. So where we're going next, continuing collaboration with Margaret in the secondary. Her and I have been meeting regularly and looking at the elementary and secondary alignment. We're finding opportunities later this year, hopefully, to have 4 and 5 visit each other. We're looking at providing time and instruction for teachers to be able to norm around the use of the rubrics for assessing writing in the elementary. So we started implementing the writing last year, but we really need to spend some time together looking at writing and using the rubrics and figuring out how we norm around that. And then another next step would be providing time and opportunities for vertical writing collaboration. Last year, the Dolbear ILT did this at one of their meetings, and the teachers found it very helpful to see how a piece of writing might grow from kindergarten through 4th grade. So when everybody, sees the same graphic organizers and the same routines and structures building from K to 4, it helps really with understanding how those help support students in learning to write more independently. So that is what I have for K to 4 for writing. Right now I'm going to pass over to Margaret for 5 to 12.
Thank you, Val. I'm just going to ask because we kind of broke this up by level. Are there any elementary questions before we go on to secondary?
Less of a, sorry.
Pete, go ahead.
Less of a question, but I was reading the Globe the other day, and there was a story about our old reading program and just kids and families that are still suffering as a result of it. So it's good to see that we've moved well beyond that, and we're on to other programs that hopefully will be more successful in helping struggling readers. So it was just timely. I think I saw it just the other day.
Yeah,
in the
that's
Globe.
definitely, that story keeps evolving. Yeah. And that was a huge, obviously a huge focus through our curriculum review. There wasn't that recent Globe article, but there was the Soul to Story podcast that came out, something for us to, lots of conversation around different core literacy programs. So I think we're pretty happy where we are right now too.
Kevin?
Do students have the opportunity to basically write multiple drafts around this? So I see that we're working on creating writing rubrics and looking at student data. But I'm wondering if just the process of students looking at the work that they've done and actually looking to write multiple drafts of a topic. I just didn't know if that was part of the instruction that's happening.
Yeah, Val, we can't see you the slides up, but I'm assuming you want to jump in here. I heard your voice.
Yeah. I can definitely speak to that.
Go ahead.
Yes. So, the whole curriculum is built on a writing process, right? So they start with some shared writing, and that their shared writing is heavier in the younger grades, and then continues to build through the upper grades as we get to 3 and 4. So they do a shared writing piece following that process, and then they will start to draft, sometimes independently, sometimes with partners. And then there's a ton of peer editing involved in the process, and then writing checklists that students learn to use both with their peers and independently on their own writing. So there's lots of opportunities for them to read, revisit, revise, and really look through the lens of the writing process. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Margaret, you want to jump in?
Sure. So I'm really excited to share this because since 2021, writing and specifically our writing development scores have been a huge focus for us. So prior to 2020, which was the pandemic year, the teacher, and I started in 2020, the teachers were using the Pearson textbook, which in a way, the pandemic was a perfect time to kind of evaluate that and think about if it was as effective as they wanted it to be. And they really said that they needed something, especially with the hybrid learning, that was a little more flexible. It gave them a little more room to meet the interests and the needs of the students in front of them. So it was at that point that we began the work on creating curriculum guides that were based on standards and skills and gave some room for a little more creativity with maybe adding more diverse texts, bringing in something that was more engaging for the students while still making sure all students were getting a common experience across the skills being covered and the standards being covered. So we really made a solid shift to that in 2021 and have been working on those writing guides ever since. This is the first year we really felt good about them, and we're spending this year kind of, now that we're comfortable with them, where can they be tweaked, where can they be added to? Where do we need more scaffolds? Where could we insert some of the adolescent literacy strategies that we've been getting from Hill for Literacy, which I know Val also works with at the K through 4 level. And I just want to say, working with Val and the shift that they have made in the elementary level is really exciting to us at the secondary level because it's so much more aligned with what we are doing, which is writing in response to reading. And less kind of just like personal experience type writing, and it's more aligned with what they're asked at the secondary level to do in the MCAS. And it's been great to kind of connect the 4th and 5th grade teachers, because while 5th grade is in some cases still technically elementary school, for us it's almost like their bridge into the secondary level. So to be able to have some continuity with that in this new curriculum that's been adopted at the elementary level has been great. So we're now working from these teacher created curriculum guides that are focused each term around a type of writing that's in the framework. So at the middle school, in terms 1 to 2, they work on narrative writing. Terms 2 to 3, they work on explanatory writing. In terms 3 to 4, they work on argumentative writing. And then at the high school, it's the same system, except for in the 4th term, they produce a capstone project around a topic of their choice or a piece of literature that's guided by their teacher, and they demonstrate their understanding of all 3 types through a cumulative capstone project that they work on in the 4th term. And I think teachers and students have really been loving that, and we actually featured that at the student NEAS kind of got to go around and talk to some students, and they showed their capstones, and that was really excited. They were exciting to present them. So that's kind of one of the major shifts we've made. The other major shift is when we looked at what we were doing, we realized that we're asking kids to write, but are we giving them a clear process through which they can fully develop their ideas and fully develop their writing? And even after we had the curriculum guides, we realized that was the piece that was still really missing. And we did a lot of research and we adopted the Empower Writing program. And as Kara was saying, all social studies teachers 5 through 12, all ELA teachers 5 through 12, EL teachers, and a lot of the special education co-teachers all spent last year getting trained in that. So that's been a huge shift. This year, we're continuing 4 times throughout the year to have support from Dr. Bonnie Singer and Jess Curtin, who kind of developed the program. They're coming in, they're co-teaching lessons with teachers, they're observing teachers teach lessons, or they're doing demo lessons in the mornings and then going around to PLCs in the afternoon to see kind of where teachers may be struggling with implementation or what's going well, and be able to have that time to ask questions. So that's been really great. I already mentioned that we're infusing a lot more of the science of reading that's so prominent at the elementary school now to kind of fill in some of those gaps that we are seeing from previous programs, and how are we helping kids who maybe aren't as far along as we think they should be with literacy when they get to the secondary level. What are some strategies that we can implement that meet them on their development level, but also help them to be, to comprehend text better and to really spend more time interacting with text rather than just reading it and then doing something with it, but to actually dive into the text and fully understand it. And one really exciting thing is that Wilson Reading, which I know they use the Foundations program at the elementary school and is really a renowned program in the science of reading, approached Empower, and we just found this out in October, and asked them if they would come on board with them to kind of be the missing writing component. And they're saying it's going to be almost like Empower is the science of writing to their science of reading. So that's really exciting for us because we were kind of an early district before. Now they're going to be everywhere because they're partnered with Wilson. So that's exciting update. So I want to talk a little bit about what is Empower, because I know that you requested a writing update, and this is really what the bulk of our work around writing has been since we realized it was a need in our district. So it obviously draws on research. It does a lot with self-talk. It talks about making the invisible visible. So when we talk about language with students, that's not concrete for them. And Empower gives them tools to be able to make that more concrete and kind of take wherever they are, take their ideas and their thinking to the next level. And one thing that teachers love about it, and I can't emphasize enough like how great the teachers have been open to this in making major shifts and really like implementing and embracing it. One of the things that the NEASC team, when we met with them, said at the high school is they're like, what are these brain frames? We see them in every English classroom we go into. So that was good to hear people are embracing it and using it, and the teachers have been tremendous with this work. But one thing that we loved about it is it focuses on the how of writing and not the what. So it doesn't matter anything students are writing, if it's a history essay, if it's a lab for science, if it's a research paper in English, if it's a literary analysis paper in English, if it's a narrative in English, this gives them the how, and it doesn't matter what. It doesn't matter what book they're working with, what text. This is something that they can use forever, and that makes them more independent in thinking about their process. So another thing that's really, I already mentioned that it's interdisciplinary, but it provides vertically aligned common language. So they're hearing the same language around writing from the time they're in 5th grade to the time they're in 12th grade. And of course, by 12th grade, they've taken the pieces of this that work for them and just kind of run with it. But every student is learning it and they're hearing that common language. So rather than having to relearn every year what language a certain teacher uses around writing or what rubric they use, they're hearing that common language and they're seeing those vertically aligned common rubrics from year to year. And then that really means that they can use that mental capacity to focus on their writing itself. It's highly differentiated, and I'll talk about that a little bit when I talk about brain frames. But you know, some students are writing a 6-paragraph essay and some students might be writing a 4-paragraph essay. And Empower allows them to do that without having one kid be like, oh my God, I have to fill in this whole organizer, and another kid being like, well, I could say way more than what this organizer is asking me to say. So it gives them a process without being prescriptive and either overwhelming or limiting them. It's explicit and systematic, and what I'm going to talk about on the next slide is it really helps to give them self-talk questions to foster independent thinking. So I know you have all seen this graphic before. That's Bonnie and Jess, one of the days when they were working with the teachers, and that's Meg Fishman. She's a 9th grade teacher who's really embraced this process and been having great success with it. Some of her students actually presented at NEASC today as well on the process. So it's a 6-step process where it's evaluate, and I'll just quickly talk about, like, so when they're in the evaluate stage, they're asking themselves, what do I have to do? And now that I know what I have to do, and there's a whole process for figuring that out, how many parts is my paper going to need to effectively do that? And it also gets them away from like, how many paragraphs should this be? Or always thinking everything has to be a 5-paragraph essay. No, let's evaluate the prompt. What are you doing? And how many parts do you need to do that effectively? They then make a plan where they ask themselves the question, okay, now that I figured out how many parts I need, how am I going to label those parts and what is my job in each of those parts? The next step is the organize, and they're asking themselves, how do I frame what's in my brain and tackle writing those parts? And essentially, as they get older, a part equates to a paragraph. And then is the work stage. So the work stage, they kind of ask, how do I lay my paper out? And the work stage is where, and I just did this with my seniors, I kind of talked to them about, okay, now you know what you're going to say. Here's the pattern for introduction. Here's the pattern for conclusion. Here's how you integrate your quotes. Don't forget about transitions. So in that work phase, they're really in it, thinking about, now that I know what I want to say, this is how I want to say it. And then the evaluate stage, and I think, Kevin, this kind of gets into the question that you asked. They're asking themselves, what needs to change? And there's actually a way that they can use, we already had rubrics, but Empower also has tools for you to create individualized rubrics for them if there's particular things that you want one student to really be looking at. But also it gives them time to kind of look at that rubric
and evaluate what pieces of this is my paper missing, rather than just relying on teacher feedback and then, you know, either saying, oh, I'm happy with what I have, I'm not going to make the corrections the teacher suggests, or to just verbatim make those corrections. So it asks them to kind of think about their writing before they hand it in, and then rework it, and then hand in that final, after the drafting process, that final product to the teacher. And I think a lot of times we emphasize too, we work on giving in our feedback questions rather than rewriting it for them, so that then if they want to take that feedback, it forces them to think about, like, okay, this is where I got my feedback. How can I rework my thesis so that it's more clear? And I should say embedded in every one of these steps is things like a thesis helper. In the work stage, there's different layouts that they can use for their paragraphs. In the organized stage is where the brain frames come in. So there's a lot of helpful tools that are embedded in the patterns of the introduction and the conclusion that are embedded within each of these steps. So I know I'm going on and on because I love this program, but I'll just talk quickly about brain frames. So these, what I love about them is brain frames can be used totally in isolation, whether you're writing a paper, not writing a paper. They can be used to help you think about a math problem, a science lab, something, you know, the causes and effects of World War II in history. That reference shows my limited knowledge of history. World War II is just the first thing I always think of. But tell what I know, there's 6 patterns. So tell what I know, that's a telling frame. Explain causes and effects. Sort ideas into categories. Make connections between ideas. Compare and or contrast something. So this frame allows you to do one or the other or both. And then sequence ideas in order. So essentially, like, every language-based task that a student could be asked to do aligns with one of these frames, which makes it great for note-taking. It makes it great for when you're reading a textbook, organizing your thoughts. It makes it great for if you're analyzing literature. We had a teacher, Bridget Haggerty, in the 9th grade who did a whole thing around analyzing poetry using one poem, using these different frames to really get at every aspect of the poem. So they're not just to aid in the writing process, but there's something that can be used across the board for them. And I will just mention too that all of the paraprofessionals were trained in brain frames so that they can support students in using these in a more interdisciplinary way. And I've also given a PD for the science department on brain frames and thinking about how they could incorporate them in science so that they're not just seeing them in English. So the next slide just kind of shows that visual piece of what each of the frames looks like, and how it kind of really gives kids the visual. However, they are not given like a graphic organizer that looks like this. They create the frame themselves. So one student's showing connections frame might have 10 connections, another students might have 5. So this is a way that they could sit down at the MCAS and think about, like, how am I going to organize this? Oh, this question really would be great with a showing cause and effect frame, and they can take a blank piece of paper and create that frame. So it's a lot less limiting than a standard graphic organizer where it's like fill in the blanks and, you know, this is what you should, exactly what you should have. And then the pictures I included are just a 6th grade class, Crystal Funnel 6th grade class. They did stations for each brain frame to, and they rotated around to analyze after they finished reading Where the Red Fern Grows before they wrote their essays. Okay, and then the final slide is our writing development progress from 2021, which is where we really shifted to those writing-focused curriculum guides. That means they incorporate literacy as well, but they terms focused on a particular type of writing, as I explained, to now. So while we still have a long way to go, what I do want to point out is that if you look at 2021, in the 5 through 8, I should have said this first. Need to reference my notes. This is just looking, so their writing gets scored in 2 ways. It gets a conventions grade, which we've never had trouble in. We always do pretty well on that. And then we get a writing development grade, which is kind of like their organization and their, like, the thoroughness of how they develop their ideas. That's where we were seeing that they were really lacking. So when I looked at these MCAS scores, I looked just at their percent points possible to their points earned just in that writing development piece, because that's where we were low. If I also factored in their convention scores, this would be much higher, but that wasn't where they were struggling. So I really wanted to isolate this piece of it. So if you look in 2021, we were below the state in every grade 5 through 8, and we were 1 point above the state in 10th grade. And then if you look kind of diagonally, this is the same cohort of kids, which I always think, if you're looking for growth, is much more beneficial to look at than just across year to year, because you're comparing the same students to themselves. So if you look at, for example, the growth in the final chart where it says cohort growth, from 5th to 6th grade, that cohort of students grew 6 points in their writing development. So they went from 30, I mean, again, these scores, we still have room for improvement, which I think we're going to continue to see. They went from 35.5 to 40.5. In between 5th and 7th grade, where they've had longer time, they grew 18.5 percentage points, just that one cohort from 5th to 7th grade. When you look at this yellow cohort from 5th to 8th grade, they grew 20 percentage points. They went from being -1 below the state to 9.5 above the state. And even this cohort, which I think we could identify many reasons, this is like the cohort that I think was really heavily impacted by when COVID hit and things shut down. They went from -3 below the state, a 27.5% out of 100, to, in their 10th grade score, you'll see that dip there because they don't take it in the 9th grade. They were still below the state, but only 1.5 below the state as opposed to 3. And their overall scores from 7th to 10th grade grew 20.5 percentage points. So, and then this last group is just 8th grade. These are our current 11th graders, I believe. They went from below the state by 3 to above the state by 4.5. So I think this is showing, and that's 27.5 percentage points of growth overall. So I think, to me, while I know we still have work to do, I think that these scores are really hopeful in that we are headed the right direction when it comes to like where we were weakest overall in writing. And I think this is the hard data from standardized testing to back it up. But I think if you talk to the teachers, they would tell you that the anecdotal data and that the benchmark data they collect, they're seeing the same pattern.
Thanks, Margaret. That was great. That was really detailed. And but I don't know if anyone has any questions before we move to intervention.
So what's the difference in how we're training students how to write with the Empower program based on how it was done before? So basically, like when we look at math, like we all get the math workbooks, right? We see like the new math and how like kids are trained now to learn math in a different way and how that's evolved. I guess when we're looking at how our students are learning how to write, I guess like one of my questions is, like, just practically, without the big educational jargon, what's the difference between Empower and how it was taught before?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just the brain frames, the graphic organizers? Is it the fact that students are all being given a one strategic way to plan out how to write compare and contrast essays versus change of continuity? Like, I guess the question is, what is the main like difference between this type of training of writing for our students versus what it used to be before? If you could sum that up magically in like because we see all the like I get the jargon differentiate, but I just want to know what's the difference in terms of like, so if a parent can look at how can I get my kid to write better, how can I help my kid like revise a draft or like work on whether it's sentence structure in 4th grade or whether it's developing a thesis statement in 9th grade, like I think if parents got what the difference is in the actual strategy, it could help.
Yeah, so I would say the difference is, before we were saying to kids, here's the prompt, go for it, right?
Okay.
And now we're giving them a process to follow so that they get a much more detailed, developed, thoughtful piece. The other main difference is we're asking them to think for themselves by giving them those self-taught questions rather than saying, here's a fill-in-the-blank organizer. So we're still providing them the scaffolding that they need, but in a less prescriptive way, which we're hoping makes them more critical thinkers, more independent writers, and provides them a process. Like, I'll just give a super quick example. I was doing this in a 7th grade class either last year or the year before, and I was like, okay, guys, so when you get a writing prompt, what's the first thing you do? And they were all like looking at me like I was insane. And I was like, what do you do when you get a writing prompt? And they're like, start writing? And I was like, that's it. You just get the prompt and you start writing. And that's the main difference, I would say, between what we used to do and what we do now. Some of them started writing without fully understanding what they were even being asked to write about. And so we're kind of slowing it down and giving them some strategies. I don't know. Does that answer it?
Yep. Yep, it does.
And I think Val hit on this at the elementary too. I think a big shift is just more structure as well, more explicit teaching. She talked about leveling the field with leveling the playing field with background knowledge, content knowledge. I think it's really focused more on writing about topics that you've learned, that everyone in the class has learned about. So it's not all that, oh, what should I write about? Oh, I've never had an experience like that. Oh, I can't relate to that. Val, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that that's a heavy focus and just more structure to the writing process as well.
No, that's definitely spot on. That's a big shift in it. It's just that we're reading about it, we're writing about it, we're thinking about it, we're talking about it, and so then when we go to actually write about it independently, we have something to say about it.
Right.
I think about the pourquoi tales.
Yeah.
When I go back and I think about the elementary curriculum, I think that's really sort of a pivotal piece, a milestone where it's they're learning about science and they're learning about sort of reading, and then that's culminating in
Cross-curriculum,
cross-curriculum. And it's that knowledge of sort of the background information, so then you can get to writing thoughtfully about a piece instead of trying to do two things at once.
Absolutely.
Learn about it and write it about at the same time.
Right.
They're sort of immersed in it, and it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting to think about. So my student reading The Red Fern Grows, I think what I had seen this year, I started off the year thinking he was just reading it too long, that there was like, she's been going through this book forever. But what I saw sort of when it was done is that book was dog-eared. It was like read like front to back, and I think every single type of brain frame was sort of attached to it, and it got to a place where he was so comfortable with the text and the story and the characters and whatever, that then when you were asked to sort of write about that and use some of these tools, the information was just like ingrained about, you know, what he was going to write about or how he was going to put a plot together or how, you know, what was happening in development. And so it was a great showcase for, okay, you know all the material, now here are the tools to sort of, you know, talk about it. And I think that's going to sort of pay dividends just sort of moving forward. I'm curious in terms of the writing piece. I think one of the things that prompted this was that we had heard from other teachers in science, in history, in, you know, civics, that the writing really needed work, that students coming out of the pandemic, we were really doing, it was hard. Students had trouble putting their ideas down on paper. And so as we hear, you know, we can see the hard data. I'm kind of interested at this point about sort of the anecdotal data from other departments. Are they seeing, because that's where sort of internally people had said, you know, we could use some work here. And I appreciate that work was done. When we're talking to teachers about what they're seeing in their students, are we maybe polling all of the teachers? Like is everyone else seeing this across the area? Because it's one thing to do it in one classroom, but is it doing what you want to do, which is, as you say, you're already presenting it to sort of science teachers to say, hey, maybe this would help in that area. Is it? You know, is it already, without you approaching it, are we seeing payback the way that maybe we were hopeful of a couple of years ago when we had heard about that and heard about this pivot in writing style?
I would say it's...
Yeah, and
Go ahead, Margaret.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think that is really important, and I think this is our first, last year was our full training year, and teachers have been implementing pieces of this for a few years, but this is our first year of full implementation, the whole process from beginning to end. So I think in the next couple of years, that would be a great conversation to have, you know, at a faculty meeting, if we could take 20 minutes and get into interdisciplinary groups and talk about what teachers are seeing and get some of that feedback from them in that way, and maybe through a Google survey. But I think definitely after this is in place for a year, maybe two, that's exactly what we want to see have happening, because we want kids, the goal of this program is that they internalize it, and every time they're asked to do a task, they can use these strategies, and I think that would be really telling.
Yeah, we were talking about that in one of our NEAS meetings today. I sat in a meeting with department coordinators, and I know the curriculum coordinators also met with the team. And as Superintendent Lyons said, they were very impressed with just the overall curriculum structure, the collaboration that's happening, and we were just talking about how there's just been so much technical work getting things in place, but we're really, as Margaret said, hopeful that the work that's done, starting at even pre-K, but K through 12 alignment will start to pay off in terms of students getting consistent experiences, especially at the transition years, the 4 to 5, the 8 to 9, that we can, have more consistency in terms of what our students are bringing to the table, and even just coming back to Empower specifically. Margaret, I'm sure you agree, but in a couple of years when we have this happening in 5 through 12, the kids even coming up to the high school, what they're already going to have in their toolbox will be pretty significant.
Be great.
So I'll just go, I know there's other things to do tonight, but so we won't go too far into intervention. We did want to highlight that is something we've been working on. I would say most specifically K through 8. At our elementary level, you've heard about this in the school improvement plans and goals. We're really trying, did a lot of work with schedules to get win blocks into every school schedule. Val has taken a lead with the Hilford Literacy Coach, working with our reading specialists. We found an area of growth for us was looking at our reading specialist intervention, which is available to students who are not necessarily on an IEP or identified, but we may find that they're functioning with skills below where we want them to be. So we were finding that we didn't, again, have that consistency, a systematic approach. So we're working with Hilford Literacy to align the reading specialist intervention based on a Hilford Literacy lesson plan that aligns with foundations. So it's giving kids kind of more of what they're getting in the general ed class, with a little bit more targeted, focused on student data. And we've been working to bring assessment meetings to the elementary levels to look at that information with the reading specialists and principals, Val and Michelle Lebrecq. And I think a big shift we made this year was just in the interest of maximizing all of our resources, was to really use that student data to drive where our staffing is. So we have reading specialists now that aren't necessarily building-based. If the need for this intervention cycle is more groups at Woodville or more groups at Dolbear, reading specialists are now traveling, because we set out the year with a goal that every student who met criteria for reading intervention got it. That we weren't saying, oh, this kid could really use it, we just don't have the staffing. So that's been a goal for us, and we're working hard to achieve that. It's been going well so far. Val, if you want to add anything on that.
You probably don't want me to, because I could talk about this. No, I think I just have to shout out the reading specialist team, because they've really put in a lot of work over the last year
Absolutely.
and a half. With this, we meet monthly. We do coaching sessions with the coach, and then also the principals, because the principals really helped us this year with when we were trying to put this structure in place after the year of training last year, in realigning our K-2 foundational skills and win blocks to allow for more consistent time for that targeted intervention and small group instruction to actually happen, because before it was so choppy that it was hard to get a group here and a group here and a group here throughout the day. So now we have this consistent block of time that they can do that. We should probably just bring a reading specialist back another night.
I know we could. That could be a topic for another night, for sure.
That'd be great.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Val.
so I won't go on and on, but it was good.
And then 5 through 12, again, Galvin's done a ton of work with their schedule, just establishing expectations for win block, what that should look like. I know that they're also looking at student data and creating intervention opportunities in ELA and math for students, as well as enrichment opportunities during that block. So that continues to be evolving as well. Margaret, if there's anything I missed there, just a quick recap.
No, yeah, so they're using a lot of those Hilford literacy strategies in the English intervention, which is great. And also they're using some Empower for writing intervention. We're doing MCAS support, but the teachers have been great about needing to strategically look at the data that we have, pull the kids, see what they need, and then design that instruction for them. So it's very different from what they were doing, and the teachers, although it's a lot more work, have been really thinking that they like this model.
Great.
At least in English, I can only speak French.
That's a good note to leave on. And we were just sidebarring over here too. One of the other topics that we can bring to the committee in a future meeting, we've been working to update our DCAP, our District Curriculum Accommodation Plan. That was also something that in making sure that we were on track for NEAS, that we had that updated, and we need further communication to really make it a living document. But I think that the product is just really represents what's actually happening in our district right now, and it also gives a lot of feedback and tools for teachers, some kind of permissions to support students in different ways as needed. We had a document to work from. I'd like to thank the curriculum coordinators, Victor Bronco, Rosie Galvin, Will Carbonaras. We all kind of worked together to update it and get things going. Our principals also weighed in, and now our next step is to really make sure that all of our staff really have a chance to view it, give feedback, understand it, and then it will be something that lives on our website and is accessible. So we're still in the communication efforts of the updated plan, but we can certainly bring that another night and share that out with you. But the DCAP highlights the curriculum efforts, the intervention efforts, just the things we have available to all of our students.
Any questions? No? Thank you so much. That was a lot. And I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Margaret and Val. I can't see you, but
Yeah.
Thank you,
we're
Margaret.
waiting.
Thank you, Val.
Thank you.
Okay, there you are. All right, have a good night.
Thank you.
Oh, and Melissa, did you have any? We didn't
Oh,
see
yeah.
Did Melissa have any questions? Are you good?
Did you?
You know that I did, but it was really just about how would be supporting both, special education students, but also multi-language learners.
Yeah. Yes.
And if the product comes kind of prepackaged for supporting those areas, or who's addressing how those students are served.
Absolutely. I would go ahead if you guys want to jump in, but I would say that I think the intent for both what we've adopted at elementary and secondary is to be as accessible as possible, and we have done some additional work in our reading intervention at the elementary level. I don't know if you want to speak to that, Val, around
I was just
ESL.
gonna say,
Yeah, I know you
so-
wanted to jump in on that.
Yeah, I can definitely I can definitely speak to this too. So the whole EL education curriculum which is the core literacy is designed around UDL, and a lot of the supports that are built in there are actually targeted to English learners. And so the whole idea of the one thing that this curriculum does very well and is very strong is the speaking and listening standards. They're built in along the way through all grade levels, and they really put an emphasis on giving kids time to learn about a topic, build that background knowledge, talk about that topic, but not just like in like a let's call on whoever raises their hand. It's really giving them that think, pair, share time, the partner work, they do triads, they do partners, different pairings based on supporting language levels as well. So a lot of the supports built in here were actually designed around effective strategies for English learners. And then for the intervention piece that Kara just mentioned, one of the things that we've really been trying to do, because the WIN block, WIN block sometimes can feel like we're trying to fit everything into the WIN block. And so, if students are getting their ELD services from the ESL teacher during the WIN block, we have now, like Kara mentioned, we have reading specialists that are kind of shifting schedules to service at other times as well. So now we have our English learners who are able to get access to reading intervention as well. So that has been part of our redesigning of our structures around intervention to make sure they're not just getting ELD or just getting reading services, they can get both. Does that answer your question?
Definitely starts, yeah.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Sorry we couldn't see you, Melissa, during the presentation. All right.
No worries.
All right, I think we're good.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Val and Margaret.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All set to move on?
All set to move on.
Great, we have, I just have two more items under my agenda. And so, Ian, can we put up the other slide deck, please? So while Ian's putting up the other slide deck, this is an update from the Vocal survey data. And so Vocal, you know, I've gotten, one of the things I did is to prepare for this presentation is to go back and kind of watch the meeting, which I presented first. And I spoke with a couple of our school committee members about it. Melissa was very helpful. Pete was very helpful. I love that Pete got a kick out of that. We had a nice conversation, and Melissa gave me some really nice guidance as well. But I went back and really looked at the questions and what made sense and what was missing from the first presentation. And so that was our first time presenting vocal data, and I will be sure to kind of cover our basis as we move forward. So one of the things that we get asked often is the whole acronym piece. What does vocal mean? What does vocal stand for? This is a student survey, and vocal are the views of climate and learning from a student perspective. These surveys are administered after students take the MCAS. And the 3 domains that are surveyed are student engagement, safety, and environment. And I won't read all of the bulleted items here, but engagement is, as you can imagine, right? The extent to which students feel engaged, intellectually and emotionally, behaviorally, in the classroom, and the extent to which students feel their parents are also engaged in their school life, right? And so safety is an important item, which I feel like we've talked a lot about. Emotional safety, physical safety, of course, but especially emotional safety. We've invested quite a bit as a district to kind of broaden our counseling support, and I feel like that's really kind of showing itself in the data. And the environment is really, I think, an important piece, because I think it kind of puts a light on student perception about their feelings around whether discipline is fair, if it's applied consistently, and I think that there's kind of takeaways across the board for anyone that might be looking at this data. So the next slide. So you've seen this slide. We presented this. So the slide deck that you're looking at tonight is 18 slides. We talked about adding 10 slides to clarify data. So it's 18 slides on the numbers, right? And so that's where we're at. This is participation rates. You've seen this before. You see the state average overall, and you see Wakefield's average overall. What you also see here is that the elementary participation rates are higher across the state. So whatever you see here in terms of trends with elementary are the same types of trends that are happening across the state. You've seen this before. This is a slide that was also presented in my prior deck. I've kind of broken this out, and I make reference to this in the later slides because this is quite a bit of information. So I think you'll kind of see and hear more about this deck in the later slides. So this is kind of a snapshot of index scores. Index scores are based on, their scores from 0 to 99. And so really what's happening is they're more around just below 30 to about 70. And the index scores are really broken down into 4 parts. Not favorable, somewhat favorable, favorable, and the fourth, let me get to the fourth. And the fourth, as you can see, is most favorable. I'll go back. So that's where we are there. And you can see our elementary scores, our index scores are kind of quite a bit higher than our middle and high school at the bottom. This is Galvin Middle School. This is Wakefield Memorial High School. And so what you see in the orange across the horizontal here is our composite of all of these bar graphs, right? And so, one of the areas that we've done quite well in as a district comparatively is safety, right? But we've outpaced the state, and we expect to outpace the state average on everything we do.
think Kevin had a question.
Doug, so the three standards were engagement, safety, and environment. Is school climate an average of those three, or is school climate a separate category altogether?
School climate is a composite of those three. So I don't have the exact, so I don't think it's an average of the three, but it's they put it into
combined,
a psychometric kind of analysis, and then they come up with a composite score there for climate.
Okay.
Yes.
So the climate's the composite score. The other three are the things that create the composite.
Yes, sir. So I included this because, what they do with the data is they kind of break it into many parts, right? And so I include this to let you know that, the subgroups within the larger group. So we have EL, English language learner, non-EL, a student that's not an English language learner, by gender, male, female, low income, non-low income, and then by race and ethnicity, right? And so, as well as students with disabilities and non-students with disabilities. So this is a snapshot. This is just something that this is a clipping of right off the DESE website, which kind of is a snapshot of the grade 10 numbers from the state. But what I wanted to convey here to the committee is that students can be multiply represented in subgroups. So, and that's important because when you start to look at parts of the data by percent, and the percentages get really small. If, for example, you see 9% or there's 10 students in a subgroup, but there are 170 students that were surveyed, those 10 students, if they are responding differently than the overall group, it doesn't mean that there's a problem, but it means that you should put a light on this and pay attention to it, right? So I can say more about that as I go through this. And so I'm glad Melissa has joined us, and because this is directly related to Melissa's question in our last meeting. I wonder, Doug, how she shared, I wonder, Doug, how we compare. How do we compare to the Middlesex League, and how do we compare to the DART districts? So this is how we compare by index score, right? Which is really the only way that I can access to kind of figure out kind of how we compare. Yes, Kevin.
So are these the high schools, or are these the entire districts?
These are the high schools.
10th grade.
These are the high schools. These are 10th grade, right? And so these are and so when you see no data, the schools did not participate at all in the survey. So that's a result in no data. There are 11 DART districts. Again, the index score ratings, there are 4 kind of index below 30 are classified as least favorable, 31 to 50, somewhat favorable, 51 to 70 is favorable, and most favorable is above 70. There's no one in the state above 70, right? So just for the record, everyone's falling in around the somewhat favorable to favorable score. And you can see here, Wakefield is here, 48. That puts us, in a cohort that ranks 4th, right? So the rankings of where Wakefield comes here or falls is across the bottom horizontally. So in our DART districts, you'll see 4th, 5th, 4th, 5th, right? So, in terms of safety, I think, and you'll see this in the Middlesex League as well, I think we did better than most, but we're kind of in the middle of the pack here with our DART districts, right? So this is where we fall with the Middlesex League. I think there's a greater span in the Middlesex League in terms of numbers, right? But you'll see between the high and the low, the index score is differentiating someone that might be in a first space. So you'll see, Arlington and Wilmington, are, Belmont is 54 in this space, but the difference between the high and the low is not as large as you might not imagine, right? So in this space, we have Winchester at 46 and Melrose at 46 for school climate. And you might even be surprised that some of the districts that are coming out in that space. Again, this is just a light, but this is directly related to the questions that Melissa asked. And I can send these to you, Neil. Okay. So you have it. So, In terms of additional information that's provided by the Department of Ed and the analysis that they do. In preparation for this presentation, I did some work with the Department of Ed and a psychometric specialist there to just get feedback on really how we should be highlighting kind of information. And so he helped quite a bit on, with our subgroups and also kind of points that I'll make at the end. But in terms of favorable and less favorable, when there is a percentage gap, so information's presented in an index, but its individual questions are presented by percentage, right? 97% of the students report a high sense of belonging and that they feel safe in school. But yet subgroups, when you look at the subgroups, it might score a little bit differently. If there is a 7% positive or 7% negative differential there, it's kind of highlighted as favorable or less than favorable, right? But when we did this, what was highlighted, and I shared this in our last meeting, favorability is highlighted in the later slides, but when we did this, what really started to show itself is our low-income subgroup, our Hispanic and Latino subgroup, as well as our students with disabilities subgroup, right? So this, I shared this information in our last presentation. This is a snapshot of significant areas of strength at the high school, right? And I'm particularly pleased and proud, and I think this represents really amazing work by teachers. This is information that I already presented, so I'm not going to go through every one of these, but in terms of students feeling safe and feeling engaged, I feel like our numbers are strong in this space. But there are some differences, and I'll get to that in a moment. So what we did, this is a new slide that we've added, right? So instead of just talking about strengths, there are also areas of growth, right? And so one of our things that we really need to kind of take a look at is, at the high school, is students that identify in the low income subgroup, right? The gap between, I feel welcome to participate in extracurricular activities, and where that shakes out, and kind of the gap there, the differentiation at the high school between favorable and less favorable, it really starts to show itself with that subgroup. In regard to environment, my teachers are excuse me, I'm just kind of reading from a distance here. My teachers, thanks so much. My teachers support me, even when my work is not the best, is a strength. But the level I feel pressure I feel at school to perform well is unhealthy, right? So a percentage of students kind of are reporting this. So that really, I think, is an indicator to the high school administration to really check in on how students are thinking and feeling, right? And so this is one of the things that we highlighted in our weekly preview this week, was really looking through the holiday. We're preparing for the holiday, but the holiday break, but we're also looking through that to look at the end of the first semester, end of the grading period, and to really think about how students are managing their stress and what this might mean in regard to the pressure students are feeling. Our safety and kind of our belonging numbers are really strong across the board, but when we start to look at subgroups, which again are smaller by percent, you'll start to see kind of gaps there. So those are things that we need to kind of look at, and we need to talk with students in those groups, right? And one of the things that, and I reference is, our goals, couple goals at the end. One of the things that I think we need to do is a follow-up survey to really inquire or dig a little bit more deeply into the questions that come from the data here, right? So this is 4th, 5th, and 8th information. Again, this was presented last time. Very favorable information. My teachers explain things in different ways till I understand in grade 4. The elementary data is kind of difficult to tease out because kids in elementary really report in consistent, positive ways how much they feel safe at school and how much they love school, right? And their teachers and kind of really everything that they're doing there. So there's more there that we need to look at, right? And you saw this slide in the last deck. So one of the kind of differences in kind of the areas of growth that I share here is not to break out subgroups necessarily, because the numbers are smaller at middle and elementary, but really to just kind of categorize what are areas of growth. So an area of strength or recognition, the 3 areas that we highlighted on prior slides. When I'm stuck, my teachers want me to try again before they help me. Teachers, students, and the principal work together to prevent or stop bullying, 93%. And my teachers are proud of me when I work hard at school. And I have to tell you, I'm particularly pleased about this notion of teachers teaching grit and teaching kids to persevere. I feel like it's an invaluable skill. I might be dating myself, but that's something we can kind of talk more about. Areas of growth in this space for Galvin are students supporting and helping one another, right, in different subgroups, right? And so one of the things that we need to learn more about is how students are connecting with one another in subgroups. I also heard from Meg Webb on this, where she talked a lot about the positive school culture team and the work that they are doing and how they can help collect additional data on this. She also felt like the work that they're doing with DCAP and really trying to support students in their the development of their academic identities, right? Because one of the areas of growth for middle school was really this notion of students reporting on their academic engagement and reporting more about how they're progressing academically. I'll say more about that in a little bit. But student behavior and discipline is also something that we need to look at and learn more about. The notion of fair at middle school is a powerful conversation. Students, do think that, things are fair and just in the aggregate, but when you look at subgroups, it looks like some of the subgroups aren't quite sure about that. I don't know that they know or understand how discipline works or if it's fair. So that's, I feel like, something that we need to collect more information on. As well as, this is grade 5, developing relationships. Like, these are things that matter, right? It's like when kindergartners enter our school, we teach them how to learn. When 5th graders enter the middle school, it's like a whole new space where socially they're adjusting and kind of the relational side of the work is critical. 8th grade is kind of the other end of that, where a lot of students feel like they got it, right? They feel like they were the seniors or the upperclassmen in the middle school, and we see significant strengths here. My teachers promote respect among students, 94%. That's remarkable for 8th grade. Can't say enough about that, right? My teachers believe that students can do well in their learning, 93%, right? High expectations, again, very positive. I feel a teacher or another adult, if I tell a teacher or another adult that someone is being bullied, they will do something to help the situation, 87%. That's really high. But again, you start to tease that out, and who make up the 13%, which was Melissa's other question, right? And so the areas of growth here, right, although positive, right, respect is an area of growth, right, among different subgroups. How do we know students are feeling respected? We need to survey them, and we need to follow up, and we need to ask in this space. We need to connect more and get better kind of indicators or feedback, right? Positive reinforcement for school rules. Again, this ties into this idea of what's just and fair, and how do we know it, and what are your thoughts about it? And so also an area of growth is supporting students to better manage their worries and their stress, similar to information that we got with our high schoolers. And this is our elementary school students, right? I feel like kids are, 99%, my teachers help me succeed with my schoolwork when I need help, 99%. I feel safe at school, 99%. My teachers care about me as a person, 99%. That's, again, I think that's kind of resultant of where students are in their development. Areas of growth at elementary are really to continue to grow and expand activities in PD that support communication and relational engagement, right? And so that's something that's critical. Continue to work with student subgroups to monitor students as well as intervention efforts. You know, some of the feedback we got from the principals was that DCAP and intervention is going to help these numbers, right? Our district curriculum accommodation plan is going to help these numbers. But also kind of develop a greater sense of student belonging, right? One of our elementary principals said, you know, similar, and this is tied into their school improvement goals. And this work is also, in terms of areas of growth, also tied into district goals and school improvement goals. But one of our elementary principals really kind of hit the nail on the head, and he said, you know, the whole relational side of the work and relationships is the key to this, key to continue to grow in this space. And I agree with him, and I appreciate his feedback on that. So again, just some information on goals, right? So one of the goals that we've had as a district, and you'll see this in school improvement plans, is enhancing students' sense of belonging and inclusion, right? How do we know students feel safe at school? How do we know they feel like they belong? These are action steps that I've listed that kind of correlate to work that we're doing. And so I think that, we'll be able to report more on this when we do our goal updates. So we'd like to do a goal update about halfway through the year, and then we will do a summary or a goal attainment summary in the spring like we've done this year. And that will set the stage for new goals as we move forward into next year. And the other piece that we need to kind of continue to work on is to kind of make sure that we're reviewing our safety protocols, not only our physical safety protocols, but also our anti-bullying initiatives. I think that's critical. You're going to hear more about that in the coming months. Our BPIP needs to, I don't want to throw out the acronym, our Bullying Prevention and Intervention Plan, it's a BPIP, has to be updated, and we're working on that right now. But we also need to kind of work with students and train staff around conflict resolution. We have to do this with students as well. We used to do a program at the middle school, a peer leadership program that I think worked really well. The organization that we used to work with no longer offers that program, and I think it's needed now more than ever. So we are kind of working to figure out if we can't do it through that organization, how can we do it? So there'll be more information on that. And the other piece that we need to kind of do, and this kind of correlates to Kevin's questions, is how do we know, right? So we need to bring data back in these areas to talk about bullying and student discipline, to be able to talk about these are baselines, and are we trending in the positive or are we trending in the negative? What's happening? What are the occurrences? What are we seeing? And what are we doing about it, right? So we're doing a lot of work in this space, and I know individual teachers and teams, especially at the middle school, are doing a lot of work in coaching around relationships and behavior, and kind of really trying to coach kids how to be their best selves. But we need to be able to demonstrate that and hear more about it. So I hope that I broke out the information a little bit more effectively than the last deck. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. Pete?
I appreciate the second attempt at the deck. I think the growth information really helps. I mean, when we see this, it's got to sound rhetorical. We don't just want to see the stuff we're doing well, but also how we can do better. And so from that perspective, I really appreciate the additional information here. I think it helps make this content a lot more actionable.
Thank you, Pete.
Anyone else? Melissa? Any questions, comments?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay. I do appreciate the additional slides. I think it was exactly sort of what we asked for. I think to Pete's point and what we had said last time was sort of, it's nice to know when things are going well, but it's hard to action those things. Like, yes, yeah. And I think we've heard it in youth risk behavior surveys. We do have strong connections with students. I feel like a lot of students in district feel like they have a a trusted leader, and a number of them are through like extracurriculars, like we saw earlier. The number of programs that we have in our district, just a lot of strong staff that are really good at making those connections with students, and I think that's great. It is you can see in the growth stuff that there's some interesting stuff in there, like some students don't feel like they can engage in extracurriculars, or some students feeling pressure to maybe overperformer. Those are some things that we can actually there's some meat there that we can like look into. And I think that's what's important. It's while we're doing all of the other work, it's important to sort of see where the gaps might be, however small, that we can actually action. And I think vocal data, on top of sort of some other maybe climate stuff, maybe in teacher polling, and I know we put polls out to the community to sort of get family measures of how they feel culture is. I think all of that is a whole picture coming together. Would only be helpful to sort of inform us where we're doing, not just in the academics, putting sort of pencil to paper, but also in the climate that we want our students to learn in, because we know that they do their best learning in a healthy environment where they feel supported. Kevin?
Do we require our low-income students to pay user fees for extracurricular activities? That would be a direct connection that could affect.
That is exactly what I was thinking. I know that we offer some assistance where we can.
So sometimes yes, sometimes no, depending on their need.
Okay.
So there are different levels of need. If their need reaches a threshold, then the answer is no.
Got it.
It's interesting. I think about, if student services wasn't so, if there wasn't a lot of work going on the school start time, this would be something great for student services to be taking a look at.
Great.
Dig into some of this. Maybe that's an area of growth for school committee, where we can look into that a little bit more. So honestly appreciate it. I think sort of our concerns were sort of heard and brought back with some of the information that we were looking for.
Thank you for the feedback.
And don't feel nervous about the 18 slides.
No, it's only plus 10, so we're good. So if I just had one other item, we had talked about an HR update in terms of understanding or hearing about the number of positions we have open. So currently we have 28 positions open. Only 2 of those are teacher positions, and they're currently so the positions are open, but they're currently being covered by subs, right? And so they remain as kind of positions that we're looking to fill as we move forward. So 2 for Unit A. There are 7 from Unit C, and the rest are from our other bargaining units. We're looking at sub positions, cafeteria positions, traffic supervisor, lunch monitor, custodian, interventionist, right? So that's kind of a quick snapshot. Happy to answer any questions that anyone might have regarding HR.
Questions?
So,
Melissa, any questions? No. Okay. Thank you.
So my last comment, just a very quick update, is we are working on securing a date in January, likely be the second week in January for the second community forum. We're just collecting some information on that, making sure that there are no conflicts, and we will kind of get that squared away before the end of this week and get information out on that.
And the current topic of choice for that forum is?
So the second community forum we'll be inviting parents and community members in, just to kind of hear more about the possibility of a later start time, right? So we'll kind of summarize what we think we've learned from the doctor who came in to talk about the science of a later start time and how it can benefit students. So we'll summarize that, and we'll kind of look at some models. We also want to talk about where the rest of the state is, including very specifically the Middlesex League. So one of the benefits that we have is that this is not a new concept. 8 of the 12 districts in the Middlesex League have moved to some type of later start, which means that they have a later start time in the afternoon for athletics, and we're really adjusting to them instead of them to us, right? So this will put us if we make a recommendation to school committee and school committee decides to adopt one of those recommendations, which leads to a later start time, it has the potential to put us in line with the rest of the Middlesex League. But that's where we're at.
It's not lost on me when I travel to work in Cambridge. My middle schooler has long left the house, and my elementary kid is getting on the bus. And then when I drive through Melrose, I see their middle schoolers walking to school. So I'm just like, it's interesting. Even just next door, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
So, cool.
Yep.
All right. Is that it for?
That's it for me. Thank you so much for the time.
Wonderful. Moving on to chair comment and action items in our agenda, we were going to talk about staff participation at school committee meetings. So this was something that had come up previously, a request from the Wakefield Educators Association to sort of take part in some of our meetings. Came through an email, and the WA leadership, Jess Cummings, the president of the teachers union, came and spoke to us. And I believe Pete, your subcommittee had taken on some of that work in policy, and you had met with Jess, and we were going to have some discussions about that. And I was wondering if you wanted to give an update.
Sure, I'll give an update. So just to maybe recap some of the things you said. So we had the initial request that came in to us to increase participation from the union at school committee meetings. And one of the things that we wanted to look at as we took it back into the policy subcommittee is what could this look like at a school committee meeting? And was there a policy that needed to go into effect, or maybe there could be something added as a potential just chair agenda item? And so in our most recent meeting, we kind of came up with an idea of what we thought this could look like. And what I wanted to do was maybe describe it to the rest of the committee for their input. It wouldn't be for a vote. And then it would be up to you as the chair to make a decision as to, maybe with our input, as to whether or not you think it's an idea you'd like to consider adding to an upcoming agenda. Sure. So as we took it back into the subcommittee, one of the areas we discussed is how do we get all employees of the district to be able to be represented at the school committee and not just a subset. We didn't want to have it so that I'll just use a simple example. Only unit A and C were represented, but other bargaining units or staff members that maybe weren't part of a union didn't have the same voice. So we wanted to make sure that if we, had some additional participation, that anybody could participate in the same way. And so the idea that we came up with was effectively to have a section either at every month in a school committee meeting, or potentially every school committee meeting, depending on what the agenda looks like, and welcome any staff member in the district who'd like to come and sit here and talk to us about a topic. It doesn't even matter what the topic is. It could be, we have a few audience members here today. Maybe they could just come and introduce themselves and tell us, something they're happy with, something that they're proud of in the work they do in the district. And it would give an opportunity, unlike the public comment section we have, where we could have that back and forth communication as long as it didn't involve anything that required, as part of open meeting law, some type of notice or vote or anything. Like we couldn't take a vote on anything, but it could be something that we could then take to consideration to potentially add a vote to some type of future agenda if we so choose. So that was the idea that we had, and really the idea behind it was just the original request was about improving communication, and other than students, the other group that I personally like to hear from most are our staff. And we obviously hear from a bunch that come in via administration, but it's a subset of the staff, and it's usually like our curriculum coordinators or maybe our leaders who are here to talk about a project. And I think the idea we had is it just opens it up to anyone in the staff who wants to come and talk to us about a topic. If it turns out that it became an overwhelming amount of time, then we could look at maybe, limiting the amount of time per meeting just to make sure that we get through the rest of our agenda item. And I think, honestly, that would be a good problem to have. I mean, I think, if we had 10 staff members here who wanted to come in and tell us what they're proud of, or, even if they have something that they have a concern about that they want to raise, I think, that was what we kind of had in mind. So, sorry, go ahead, Ken. Sure.
So I'm just confused. Are we talking about having representation from employees in the district, like whatever teacher, crossing guard, whatever? Are we talking about having having a seat at the table to be able to discuss items that are already on the agenda? Are we just talking about inviting people to come and say, hey, what's going on? So for example, in today's agenda, let's just use an example. We have the vocal data follow-up. We have the writing intervention update. I could see if we had a para-professional sitting on the table right now, if we had a random 6th grade English teacher sitting on the table right now, I could imagine that insight to what the agenda just happens to be today could be something. Is that what you're kind of alluding to? Or are you talking about more how do you feel generically about anything?
Well, so I think the way we envision it is we're not here to limit the content of what somebody can talk about. So, if they're coming to talk an agenda item that we have, that they can talk about an agenda item. If they're coming to tell us that they're proud of something they're doing in the district, that they can tell us that. If they're coming to tell us they're upset about something and they want the school committee to be aware of that maybe they don't feel we're hearing, then they have that opportunity to provide us with that feedback. It was not we're going to take a student seat over there and just plop one person, because that goes back to the original problem we mentioned, that we're not trying to limit this to just one person, just a Unit A member, just a Unit C member, but have it be open to anyone, have the same possibility for anyone who is a member of the staff, not have it just be a subset of staff members that have that privilege. And I think this is open to the chair to look at tweaks as we do it. I mean, we may find there's no participation, and maybe we'll look at tweaking it some other way. It doesn't have to be, this isn't a policy where it's etched in stone and has to work a certain way. I think the goal is, there's an ask to improve communication. So open up the door and encourage additional communication directly to the school committee, and give us an opportunity to be in a dialogue on that communication. I mean, that's the idea behind it, and we can adjust it as we see fit if it needs tweaks or improvements, or the goal is if an idea is brought before us and it's something we can't discuss, then we could look to add it to an agenda item. If it's something that is being discussed, we may say, come back to the table when we're going to talk about local data. We'd love to hear your input. I think that flexibility is open, where it's not just you missed your 2 minutes at the beginning of the meeting to give us a statement. There may be some ability to bring input in, at the chair's recognition later on. So that's the idea we had. Obviously, it's open to everyone to give feedback, and then at the end of the day, we're not proposing a policy. It would be something that would be the chair's discretion if the members of the committee, like the idea that we were proposing.
Yeah. Any questions? Mr. Markham?
Thank you. Thank you. I think the first of all, thanks to the policy subcommittee for being thoughtful, how to address the issue. It seems that this is perhaps a bit of a compromise of sorts. Maybe I'm misinterpreting, but it seemed that the question from the WEA was to how to incorporate them as union leadership, and not necessarily the entire staff. I'm not necessarily opposed to what you're suggesting. So is that am I remembering the request correctly? It was for sort of even a seat at the table for the union leadership.
Correct.
Am I remembering that correctly?
No, you're not remembering it incorrectly. So I think one of the things we really talked about in the subcommittee was, if we want to improve communication this way, how do we do it in such a way that is not, we don't want to discriminate against certain groups in the district. We want everybody to be able to give us the same amount of input and have the same ability to contribute. So, it could be a union leader who's here, but it may be just a staff member, maybe somebody who's non-represented who wants to come and talk to us about a topic. And it was, so yes, it is definitely, we tried to look at what we envisioned in the subcommittee would make sense versus just looking at it as it was a static request to do it a certain way. At the end of the day, I think the way we looked at it is we want to improve communication, and we want to encourage anyone in the district who wants to come and communicate with us to do so, and we can hear what they have to say. And some of it will be positive, some of it may not be positive, but open up the doors of communication as the ask was given to us. So yes, it was definitely a compromise from the ask, but that was the reasons why we maybe looked at it a different way than just saying, oh, it has to be this way or not do it.
So would this potentially look like a standing agenda item? So it's not the, item, the new item number 8 becomes staff input, or whatever it's called. And the staff, and anyone who shows up has the opportunity to comment during that agenda item, but is not a full participant in the other 12 items that are on the agenda.
Correct.
It's not a dialogue throughout the meeting, whereas it's not a seat at the table.
Correct.
It's
But I
adding
will
the
say-
standing agenda item for feedback for a staff member of any sort.
Yes.
Union leadership or not, to be able to make a comment or statement, share.
I want to say more of a discussion, right? Because there's already public comment. Like, if somebody wants to give a comment, they can already do that today. What
Right.
was missing is we don't have the ability to do anything but thank somebody for their comment today. So it allows us to have a more of a discussion than simply say thank you. The other thing that I think it does is, let's say there's some valuable input they provided on a topic that's on the agenda. I think it does give discretion to the chair to welcome them back up there if we're talking about that. And recognize them as the chair so chooses to give additional input on a topic that may be of interest to them on the agenda that we have. Go ahead. Sorry.
So if I can finish, so I understand that. I think your last point might be a bit of a slippery slope.
Okay.
To be honest, not that the chair couldn't have the discretion, but I don't think we can create a category that sets staff members aside from citizens. That it's not a privilege we're allowing to citizens to just come in, fully participate and engage in that way. So I think we need to be mindful of something that we're granting a group of people, granted our wonderful employees who should have that input, but I'm not sure we want to. That almost gives them a status that the citizens really don't have.
So I mean,
So that's just.
Is your concern for the introductory part 2 or just for the later on participation?
Probably more of the latter, just, off the top of my head to answer your question. I just want to make sure that if we're going to be adding a standing agenda item, that there are some guardrails, around that it doesn't become an opportunity. It doesn't become something that it's not intended to be. I think the well-intendedness of increasing opportunities for communication is very broad and very broad, right? I would just want us to be cautious that there are existing vehicles for staff members to inform the committee about concerns. There are grievance procedures that exist within collective bargaining agreements. There are already processes in place to do some of the things if this happens to go a little south on us. And I'm just
Agreed. Yeah, I did not look at this as a replacement for any existing process we have. But I think the request was to improve communication and allow for, it was unit participation, but let's call it staff participation at school committee meetings. And so I think our meeting definitely focused more on the former, not the latter. So, the idea that we could have an open opportunity in wherever the chair so chooses to put it on the agenda, and that, if there's something to discuss, we can discuss it. I mean, as I said, it could just be an opportunity. We have 3 guests here today. I'd love to have, if we have a guest, I don't even know 2 of our guests. I mean, I'd love for them to have an opportunity to come sit at the table for even 2 minutes and just tell us who they are, what they do. They're introducing it not just to us, but to the community as well. So,
But people also have a right to come with some level of privacy and sit in the audience.
No, they
You don't necessarily have to call people out.
This is not, no, but keep in mind, we're not calling anyone out.
Well, you just did.
No, we're not calling anyone, this is an open opportunity
Right,
for somebody
right.
to
I get it.
participate in that way, not a requirement that they do by choosing to spend their evening with us.
Yeah. Okay.
Kevin?
Yeah, I guess just think about that larger goal. Is the larger goal of this just to improve communication, or is the larger goal to provide like feedback about particular agenda items where it might be useful to have a perspective from a, you know, a teacher or an employee at the table.
Well, so I think Tom raised concerns specific to having it tied to agenda items, and
I don't mean, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I don't mean to, I'm looking at
No.
you, I don't mean to single you
No,
out.
you can-
And
no,
that's-
it's
It's
fine
a
to
question
single
for the
here.
larger team. I feel like we're hitting
So
you.
my view is, you know, the input could be related to an agenda item, or it could just be unrelated to an agenda item. You know, no, I mean, it's not, this isn't something where we're saying you can come sit here, but you can only talk about the 4 items we have on our agenda. I mean.
I would rather see it focused on the agenda,
Me
and if
too,
there's an agenda item that someone wants
I'm
to
kind of, yeah, I
bring
think
before
I'm
us.
I think I'm very uncomfortable with just having people just be like, talk about whatever they want, just because I don't think we're allowed to talk. I guess we could talk about whatever we want,
Well,
but
the
like,
open-
we
can't
generally
engage
stick to
in
the
that
agenda.
conversation.
Right.
The open meeting law component of it
Yeah.
is, it needs to be tighter than sort of just talk about anything. I'm sorry, Melissa, I didn't want to cut you off. You were starting to say something.
No, I think because of open meeting law, we do have to have the comments in the agenda when we post it. So if someone wants to talk about a specific topic, I think they need to let us know, and then we add it to the agenda before we have the meeting. It's got to follow the same 48 hours as everybody else.
Well, I think, just a point of clarification, and just, you know, hopping off your comment, I'm not of the opinion that it's what the staff may want to talk about, it's what we can respond to.
Yeah.
The staff or any citizen should be able to come in and say, frankly, whatever they feel is important to them at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's our ability to engage in that as a collective.
As a dialogue.
Is what is truly limiting.
Yeah.
And that's my, you know, my funnel concern.
Yeah. Yep.
Just quickly, Pete, I know one of the things that I think when this request first went through, you may have reached out to MASC to see if similar practices are being done elsewhere. Can you tell us what the result of that was?
So I was only able to find one district that had any type of specific union/staff participation. It was Marlborough, and it was something they had done for over 20-something years. And in their case, it was an actual non-voting seat at school committee meetings. Their feedback, I spoke to one of their policy people, was extremely positive. They said that it really improved, that just having the person there and et cetera, just improved communication. So it's obviously only one district out of the entire Commonwealth, but their feedback was extremely positive on the improved communication and interactions. So.
Okay, yeah, interesting. You know, my original thought was, you know, several years ago, kind of my 1.0 experience on the committee, I was chair, and we were selected, just a couple people in the Commonwealth in districts across the country, to go to Denver for a day, and it was on how to basically labor management relationships, and how to kind of collaborate to improve student performance and success and those sorts of things. And so districts across the country kind of presented on unique things that they were doing. And this was something that had been brought up a little bit, that I was kind of intrigued. It was a small district in Minnesota that was doing something similar. My original thought, I think, or my reaction is just to be a little protective of this space, and what this meeting is to be. It's a business meeting of the school committee. And I am hesitant to relinquish that to any particular group. I think we are bound by, you know, the responsibilities that we have been given to maintain this as a business meeting for the agenda items that we have in the business of the school district. With that said, I think collaboration and communication is so critical. In any organization, it certainly is critical here as well. So how do we utilize existing processes, practices, structures to, you know, maybe involve or improve communication or allow collaboration? So I know in the past, and I too have been happy to see some additional participation here at the meetings. That had always been the case. It kind of had stopped recently. So I think the opportunity for people to hear what we're discussing in person. Even comes across differently than when you're online. We've had staff and faculty email. We've had staff and faculty participate in subcommittee meetings, like any member of the public can. Participate in public comment at meetings, at subcommittee meetings as well. We started, what was it, a couple years ago? Last year, you might have been the first one. We have a representative at the JLMC. And so I think that that's been, and having been able to do it this year, it's a wonderful opportunity. So I think we've made some good inroads. I'm potentially interested in maybe the compromises, as Tom put it, to what the committee is suggesting. But I definitely am very hesitant to change the structure of this public meeting, our business meeting, when I think there are other avenues that we can continue to massage and improve to reach the outcomes that I think was being requested in the original ask from Ms. Cummings.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate. I think to your point, Kevin, having done that sort of that pilot year of the JLMC, the Joint Labor Management Meeting, I find that to be incredibly enlightening, sort of seeing the collaboration that happens at that level between administration and staff, and WEA leadership. And I think that you've started up a JLMC at C level as well to sort of gain that additional sort of input in that collaborative process. And so I appreciate that there. And there are a number of avenues to sort of reach out and give sort of feedback to committee. I'm not opposed to sort of chunking out sort of a comment piece, but I think the open meeting law component, like what can be discussed in that space is, I think I just got to think about it a little bit in how best to sort of to react to it. I think one thing that's different and one thing that got brought up is that we do solicit sort of student feedback on topics that might come up, and it has been given, and it's been great in the times that it was given. But there's, aside from sort of email, there is no other avenue for sort of students to sort of give us their input, as opposed to, except for here, when we talk about things. The most recent one being the math, the advanced math curriculum. I thought some of the insight from those students, I still mention it to my kids, I think is useful. So I think maybe a cautious approach. I honestly appreciate you guys taking this on, and all the thought. I know you've had a lot of communication with sort of teacher leaders and the union about it, and sort of coming up with a compromise. I think if we sort of look at it in the short term, try and find some ways to sort of put some guardrails on it, and then kind of double down on some of the existing avenues, and just reiterate that we have an open door policy in terms of anyone in the district can email any one of us about some concern that they might have. Our agendas get posted 72 hours in advance, and so if there's a topic that's coming up that you feel particularly passionate about, just like any other member of the community, you absolutely can come. You can write a letter, you can come to public comment, you can sort of engage in that way and sort of let us know what your thoughts are in that way. And then just continue to ask administration to put sort of, a collaborative eye on things, and put teachers in front of us that can give us a whole picture on where we want to be as a district and what's going to be best for sort of student outcomes. We will look at maybe adding a separate, after public comment, maybe a staff comment section. I don't know what we would call it yet, but I'd like to sort of double check with maybe council or something and see how we can sort of frame that and what that would look like in keeping in accord with sort of what our requirements are under Mass General Law. So if that would be okay.
I mean, that makes sense to me. I think any section we have has to be open meeting law compliant. We definitely don't want to add a section and find out we broke open meeting law and have to be retrained. So
yeah,
I think that makes perfect sense.
Okay. All right. I will do some follow-up and keep the committee updated in the larger group. So again, thank you, and thank you, Melissa, for your work. Appreciate it. As policy. I think there's a delay. I know you still live in Wakefield, so it can't be that far,
It was a little noisy here, sorry.
No worries. Probably all the carols. Okay, so moving on to Agenda item 9, subcommittee reports, finance and facilities. Mr. Markham.
We, because of a posting issue around Thanksgiving, were not able to meet as intended, so we have not met since our last meeting, but we do have a meeting that is scheduled and posted for next Thursday, a week from Thursday. So.
Great. And you, of course, are looking forward to the topping off of the
yes,
of the high school. That'll be
on the 20th.
Yeah, brilliant.
We will have a meeting. That'll be the day before that.
Yeah. Good. Labor and personnel, Dr. Piscadlo.
Great. We have not met since our last meeting. However, our job description for the clerk position closed. We received some resumes for that, which I've disseminated out to the subcommittee. We are hoping to meet, and if Tom gives me a nod, on Friday at 5 o'clock.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. So Friday at 5 o'clock, we'll be meeting in executive session to discuss those resumes. Then a week from tomorrow will be our first session negotiating with Unit C. So looking forward to getting those conversations moving. And so, yeah, we'll have some updates to come in the next couple meetings.
Great. Thank you. Student services, Ms. Colleran is not here. I believe student services update would have just been sort of the update on the
Community forum.
upcoming community forum.
Correct.
And so we're looking forward to that. Pete, policy and communications.
So we met back on December 2nd. We discussed the revised field trip policy, a staff conduct policy, and 2 sections in our policy book, sections C and F. Maybe just to break these out one by one. So I think it helps maybe to level set, not just for the full committee, but anyone watching tonight, of kind of how we're working through these various sections of policy. So we are working with our MASC, the school, Mass Association of School Committee representative, to help review all of our policies and also look at just the model policies from MASC as we try to look at moving our policy site from something hosted by the district to something more complete and more easily searchable hosted by MASC in the future. And so what this involves is section by section, a review that goes on the content, comparing that to our current policies, and trying to converge what's in our current policy to what MASC has, in trying to build a more comprehensive set of policies. So we have 2 books that were completed, but they did not get on the agenda on time. And so what we're going to do for those, books C and F, is hold those till our next meeting, and we'll lay them on the table in our first meeting in January, so that they can be posted in the agenda with plenty of time for people to see that. On the field trip policy, we did draft a policy, and that took into consideration the feedback we had received from parents, and a lot of that feedback focused in a few different areas. One was what happens to kids that aren't going on a field trip, and there were also some concerns on cost as well as accommodations for students who maybe couldn't participate in a field trip without those additional accommodations. The way that policy works is we obviously welcome anyone to our subcommittee meeting to give input. We then lay the policy on the table. And then what that does is effectively puts it in our public packet and gives an opportunity for anyone in the public to give us input on the policies where they chose, maybe they couldn't attend our meeting or didn't attend our meeting. So specifically to the field trip policy, I did receive, I think the best way to quantify it is maybe negative. I received some negative feedback from our union representatives. And I think the best thing for me to do on that is, I think as I talk through it with them, I don't think that we're all that far apart. I think there may have been just I don't know what the right word is, but just there may need to be a few word tweaks done just to make it clear that, for example, there's not some expectation of an additional burden on somebody whose job is to plan an overnight field trip to then suddenly say we're expecting that person to take on the responsibility of figuring out what kids are doing who aren't going on that field trip. So there may be some areas of clarification. Other areas of clarification is I think there may have been a perception in the changes that the school committee was looking to somehow use this as a way to reduce these overnight field trips or stomp down on them. And that wasn't the goal of the subcommittee at all. the goal was not to say, oh, we're not going to do these Galvin field trips we've done to New York and DC for decades, or we're going to take some visual and performing arts field trips and overnight field trips and start to remove them. As we looked at the policy that MASC had for field trips, the school committee did get in front of them all overnight field trips, versus our current policy was that we were only asked to see the international field trip. So that was one of the reasons we had looked to bring in all field trips, and we also want overnight field trips, and we also wanted to use as an opportunity to just have a discussion about the cost, about what we looked at in the planning, about what the plans are for students who can't go, so that parents weren't finding out the night before and their kid went to school that maybe they were going to be sitting at a playground for the day or something. So I think the best thing to do on that policy is I offered to take in additional feedback. I can do that one-on-many outside of the meeting because it's just me. And then I can go to the next policy meeting, which would be in late January, and hopefully make some word tweaks that will resolve the concerns. I don't believe the concerns are massive. I think they were more just interpretations of wording that wasn't as we interpreted.
Sure.
And so that was my plan for the overnight field trip policy. The other one that we reviewed and had put on the table was the staff conduct policy. And I received, I would say, more negative feedback on that one than I did on the field trip policy. And just for some context, and it's the same context I provided to the folks that had provided the feedback, is this wasn't a custom Wakefield policy. Like, we didn't go in and say, how do we draft this policy, and we're going to focus on these areas because it's some gotcha, that we're trying to focus on. This was literally, it's almost like the model policy that is in effect in almost every district in the Commonwealth. And as I had responded back to the feedback, seemingly non-controversial for most of those districts. I don't think that the concern, when I dug into it, I think it was more on some of the words that MASC has in their model policy, more than maybe the spirit of it. Like, I think people know that, like, you have a job and you have to come to work, but the wording faithfully, for example, maybe the word choice that MASC uses in their model policy just led to confusion of some sort. So I think similar to the overnight field trip policy, just given the amount of negative feedback I received on that, I'm going to go ahead and continue to look at word tweaks and then bring it back. Just to recap on that one, our subcommittee did not work on the revised wording for that policy. It was done more than a couple of years ago by the prior subcommittee and then kind of got missed on moving it forward. And there was, one of the reasons that was being revisited, and it would have been revisited anyways as we got to book section G, but there was, I think there has been communication back and forth with the union that we just didn't have the staff conduct policy, and it wasn't meant to be an 80-page handbook that I have at my own work that I have to go read through and accept every year. It was meant to be like a high level, to be honest, like things that are obvious, like don't break Massachusetts law. I mean, that's kind of the stuff that's in that policy. So I think, as I dug into it, I don't think the feedback, I think some of it is, just an understanding that we're all working towards the same goal. And I think we'll work through these tweaks. Hopefully in the late January subcommittee meeting, I'll come back with a little bit of revised wording on both of those policies. And then when we get into February, I'll be able to bring, hopefully 2 new, revised policies back. So I don't know, for the sake of this meeting, if we should take those policies just off the table and we'll bring them back once they're revised, or if we keep them on the table and then bring a revised version back in February for both of them. I don't know procedurally what the best thing to do with that is.
I think, go ahead, Kevin. Is there?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No?
I just, like, looking at the staff conduct policy, I mean, I think 95% of the way it's written, I think works. Like, I think makes sense. There are a few clauses / phrases that, I mean, I could definitely see why teachers might have an issue with it. So I feel bad because I didn't email you any feedback, but you received some feedback.
You should feel bad.
But I do feel bad. It's truly. So I think that might be a good idea. I just read one of
Yeah, and as I said, this content is primarily boilerplate from MASC. This is not,
Yeah.
we didn't, I actually did, in responding to the feedback, what I wanted to make sure of was, did we draft this policy, or is this, if I went to like every other district I could find in Massachusetts and looked up their staff conduct policy, was it pretty much the same? This is the introductory paragraph or whatever, but that kind of varied, and I think a lot of it was just when they adopted it. Like the ones that adopted it more recently had a very similar one, but the content and some of the wording in the other sections was identical for almost every school district. And that's so. Anyway, so Kevin, I don't know.
It's for all staff too, right?
Yes, yes, yeah. This wasn't a union-specific thing, and obviously, the union's contract supersedes anything that we have in these policies.
So I would say, so it's been on the table for 2 weeks, and soliciting feedback, you've gotten some.
Yes.
And so you'd like to sort of work on it a little bit more before you sort of have it come officially for a motion before the school committee. I think our policy states that I think our policy on policy states that it needs to be on the table for 2 weeks. It doesn't say anything about it being longer than that, like that it can't be. So you can leave it on the table as is and continue to work it, and be open to feedback from anyone in the public on those policies, school committee members included, and educators.
So I like that, because I mean that's exactly what I will be doing through the next policy meeting. Is I received input, but I wouldn't necessarily describe that input as actionable. It was more just kind of an overall. I think there was a reaction that some of this was maybe not well intentioned, when that wasn't really. I mean, I think
of course
it obviously that wasn't the case. So. Right. I think we'll work through those issues. I think many of them are just maybe wording issues. Like, as I said, some of the content is self-explanatory. And, Kevin, if he can send me his feedback, just like anyone else would, that would be appreciated as well. So.
Melissa, did you have a comment? I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we should leave it on the table and bring amendments around next time.
Right. Yep.
Once we bring amendments, do we need to leave it on the table for another 2 weeks, or can we vote for amendments that night?
As long as we have a concise policy that we can vote on, either as it is clearly or as amended, then we will be fine.
Yeah, I mean, my preference would be that we have a modified policy that's in a packet for at least a couple of weeks, so that, a month, 2 months doesn't make any difference with any of these policies. It's not like, like the overnight field trip policy has to be done in December or January or February. The goal is to get a policy that's better than we started with. The staff conduct policy doesn't exist today. It's vacant, saying we'll have one. So the goal there was to fill in a missing gap that we were asked to fill in. And frankly, we would have filled it in anyways as we got, normally what we would have done is we would have got to book G and the MASC review. And frankly, we would have started with the exact policy that we have here, because that's where it came from. Go ahead.
I just had a question on the field trip policy, and I guess it's like what the practical consequences are. So when it says students unable to attend field trips must be offered a program that provides curriculum exposure, what does that mean? Like, does that mean just like whatever their curriculum that they're doing in the school, or is it like curriculum that the kids are doing on the field trip?
No. So, I mean, the goal here was to just basically say we're trying to provide programming to students that isn't sitting at the playground all day. Like, let's be blunt. Like, that was the goal of that statement is they're coming to school, right? So if they're not having the opportunity to go to New York or go to DC, how do we provide them with something educational? Because otherwise, we're doing a disservice to these students that, maybe either are afraid to go on an overnight field trip or can't afford to go on an overnight field trip. So like what we want to do is we know from our own experiences, and we know from staff feedback that these are important for social emotional, well-being of kids, that they really help with the interaction, that they learn a lot. But the challenge is we want to make sure that the kids that can't go on that have something educational that is, relevant in any way. Look, we're not going to provide the same curriculum in Massachusetts that you're going to get in DC and New York, but like we can do more than have our kids learn the night before they're going to go to the playground.
They have a substantive experience.
Exactly. That's all, Kevin. Yep. Like, it wasn't meant to say it has to be the exact.
Okay, so somewhere in, I think you were saying February, we would be looking to see these again.
That would be my hope. Let's leave them on the table. Let's continue to get feedback. Let me iterate. I can iterate with the people that gave feedback outside of the committee members. You know, I can't obviously iterate with the committee members outside of the committee, subcommittee meeting. And then hopefully I'll come back with a revised version that maybe takes away some of the negative feedback that wasn't, you know, as I said, I think was misinterpreted. But look, the goal is to get the wording to be better. So.
Okay. And we can get the MASC, like our policy book section, C and F can come back in our next meeting.
C and F are ready to be reviewed.
Good.
They were in the book today, but I just feel like because we didn't put them on the amended agenda, it makes sense just to wait one more meeting into January, and then we'll keep giving proper notice that we're going to put a motion on the table to lay them on the table. It's more of a formality.
Great. Mr. Markham?
Thank you. Let me, like the last time, thank you, Pete and Melissa and Eileen for taking this on. First of all, the policy work that you've been doing is a huge lift. So really thank you for that, especially the complete review of everything that's happening. So that is not, that can't be understated. So thank you for that. Also, like my colleague, Mr. Fontanella, I will fess up to not providing input and feeling it being, you know, I have plenty of Irish Catholic guilt around that. So I will concede that too, so I've not provided feedback. But I will do so. On the field trip policy, and I will do so in a more substantive way than now, but just sharing some thoughts as other members have. I think the need for addressing some of the concerns around the field trip policy is real. There are some practical elements there that both impact, staffing levels, pricing, cost, what engagement with administration, lots of practical elements of moving parts there. So I appreciate you guys taking that on to get that as tight as possible. The staff conduct piece, I have some broader thoughts and broader concerns about, and I'm going to start with, and maybe it's not for now, maybe it's for the February conversation. But other than that, it's a recommendation for MASC, which that isn't good enough for me on why we need this. That's I'd like to start with sort of the rationale on why we, the Wakefield School Committee, think that it's needed in the Wakefield Public Schools. That a number of these things, and I would agree with Kevin as well. I can see why some of our staff leaders would find some of these words and phrases to be certainly of concern. Whether I also agree wholeheartedly with you, Pete, and couldn't agree more that there was no mischief, there was no misintent around what this is, or what it's intended to be, or what a consequence may be. It shouldn't be an opportunity for another stab at a disciplinary matter. It shouldn't be any of those things. In fact, everything that we have, between collective bargaining agreements to state law to management rights, speak to all sorts of these things, which is kind of what leads me to say is, what are we solving here? Why are we adding one more policy layer to an already existing
I can answer this.
Depth?
It was a request from the WEA.
From the who?
WEA.
Okay. Well, the answer still might be that we don't find it a need. No, your WA requested that there be a staff conduct policy?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, okay, I know that.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
You
But that's still not good enough.
But
I get it now. I understand.
But I will say, on our policy page, we do have an existing staff conduct policy that says we're going to have some staff
and
conduct
I think
policy.
if we're having conversations.
Yeah, but we can address those things without the imposition of a policy matter.
So this has been
The ability for us to address a concern that was brought to us in a legitimate way doesn't necessarily have to, be viewed this way. Okay, I get it now.
Fair.
I mean, I'm just concerned that there are plenty of vehicles that we already have.
The contract being one of them.
Contract being, huge. I mean, the first phrase is that we expect staff to abide by the laws of the Commonwealth. Okay, I mean, do we need things do we need some of these things? Now, maybe we do, maybe we don't. But these are as much questions about what problem are we trying to address.
I mean, I can just speak to quickly, I know, just in terms of administration, and if we, for instance, had to have a conversation with an employee, and we said this is an issue of conduct. Says who? There's nothing that outlined it, and we've had that question asked, if we're saying that something is a matter of conduct
If
becoming
someone
a.
breaks the law,
Right.
it doesn't have to be a policy of the Wakefield School
Well,
Committee.
I think we're talking about
have a
less.
disciplinary.
Yeah.
Well, I know, I get
But
it.
that's been the question. If we say, we're looking into this as a matter of a code of conduct issue or conduct issue of an employee, and then the policy right now says
See your
there'll be
code of
one.
conduct that
See
doesn't
your
exist.
superintendent. And then if there isn't one, it's just a matter of how extensive does it have to be? I don't know. But that's just a question.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure, and I
In terms of
and I
the problem we're
appreciate
trying to
that,
solve, yeah.
But I'm not sure that this policy as drafted, or the 5, points that are called out, are gonna provide significant specificity to address the staff conduct
So-
issue, especially around, the one that, Pete, I think you mentioned the word, faithfulness and the promptness and attendance at work.
Oh, yeah.
That's not
The
specific
wordsmithing is
enough to
fair.
provide
I was
any
just
discipline in
speaking
the
to the
first place.
problem we were trying to solve.
What is
Yeah.
promptness? I mean.
Well, I think those were some of the concerns and the negative feedback. And as I said,
Oh,
our
I'm with you.
yeah, our subcommittee,
I get it.
our subcommittee didn't draft this
Right,
document.
so-
No.
Yeah.
I know.
Right, so this is aspirational. And so, having something, has some general guidance, and this is for all staff. And the reason it's general is because it is for all staff. This does not preclude or supersede any entitlements or protections in any of the bargaining unit contracts with all 7 of our bargaining units,
Correct.
right? So that I think needs to be acknowledged, right? And so to say that, you get into the space of, what's too much, what's too little, right? What we have was not, there's a reference to a code of conduct in our policy book, which is insufficient. It doesn't provide a code of conduct. It makes reference to a handbook that we don't have. So we're not creating a handbook based on guidance from council.
Correct.
So we're kind of in this space of, should we have a code of conduct? The first question, and in the policy book as it exists now, it's teacher code of conduct. We've kind of stepped back from that, and this was done a few years ago now. This was done a few years ago, where we don't think it's right just to kind of call out teachers around what expectations are, even general expectations. So we're having a staff code of conduct for all employees for the Wakefield Public Schools. All employees, right? All of us, right? And I say us because it includes us, right? And so, if it's aspirational and it calls for people doing positive work, having positive attendance, comporting yourself in ways that are in line with the Mass General Law, we've been asked to provide that, right? We have email that says, there needs to be some reference to this code of conduct. There needs to be something there, right? And if without it, we're kind of at a loss. So we're trying to provide it.
Yeah.
So this idea now that we might not need it is an about face or is a question that I feel like, I don't know. I just, the committee, I think, needs to, the committee is responsible for policy. So if the committee feels like, as a group, collectively, that this is not something that should be represented as part of the WPS policy, I would like, that guidance would be helpful, because it would have kind of calmed and not only calmed the waters, because I think people need to understand the intent here, right? The intent is not to kind of get in the way of the Mass General Law or any of the entitlements in any of the contracts for any of the bargaining units. That's not it, right? Again, it's aspirational, and and it's been in place. We're trying to improve what exists. And so if there's a feeling from the committee that we should step back from that, then that, I think the Policy and Communication Subcommittee, I can't speak for you, Pete, but I think Pete's been working pretty hard with the entire subcommittee to try to take our book, our policy book as a whole, and make it a model, right? And to use the Mass Association of School Committee guidance and also our legal counsel guidance to make better, right?
And as I said, I mean, clearly, hundreds of other districts in the Commonwealth don't seem to have an issue with some of these high-level aspirational things. Like Saugus, for example, I looked at, they had the same boilerplate text. I mean, because as I said, because we didn't do the same drafting of this, I did go back and do some research after I got the feedback, because I just want to understand, are we the only district who has this aspirational proposed policy, or is this just everywhere?
No, but I think what you see is some districts try to control every aspect of everything. You need to do A, B, C, and so you get into what you describe, Pete. I appreciate your description of it. At your work, I heard you say that there's an 80-page employee handbook, which I need to initial every year to say I get, and I'll comply with all of these standards. We're not trying to write an 80-page handbook, but it's like, so what is too much and what is too little? We're in a space now where we're working collaboratively. I think we're working collaboratively with and getting feedback from some of the unions around things that they might like to see change. So, but when I hear Tom say, I don't know if we need it's a question, right? And so that kind of is that's like a wow, right? Yeah. That's like we're hours into this, and if we don't need it, let's cut to the chase and move on.
My first question was really, well, what are we solving? That was my first question.
Yeah.
Because we shouldn't be just
Fixing a problem,
churning the wheels without a direction. So that was my first question.
Right, but in terms of the why
My
that you
second
asked, Stephen answered that.
Well, but I'm going to respond to that because I'm not quite on the same page with that now that I'm recalling the circumstance. But my second question was the rationale.
Yeah, got it.
And I appreciate that your descriptors, both Pete and Doug, calling this aspirational. Although I will say in all candor, I'm not particularly inspired by this these phrases. So if this is something we're going to go down, I would love to be inspired by this because it doesn't ring that way to me. Now, so the thing, and Stephen, thank you for saying that to my question because I honestly didn't remember until you just said that. But what I would say about my memory of the concern or the issue that was before us at the time, perhaps was less about asking, and I certainly don't want to put words in the WEA's mouth, but my sense of this was less about please go out and write a staff conduct policy, and more about don't use a non-existent or a very weak staff conduct policy when providing discipline. Don't use it in the context for providing a disciplinary guidance or letter of some kind because it's relatively weak. I see those two things as different.
Sure.
Go out and write a policy, or don't use something that is weak enough that you shouldn't be using in the first place. So that's kind of where my sense of thinking is at a little bit with this. So again, I'm going to finish where I started by thanking you guys. This is not easy stuff. This is a lot of detailed work that is a bit of agony, not just the wordsmithing, but those are my two big things. So what are we trying to solve? What's the rationale? And I'd love to be inspired.
Yeah, and I'll reiterate again that our subcommittee did not revisit this policy because it had already been written by a subcommittee multiple years ago and never advanced. And it's primarily MASC boilerplate, as I said. So, I
Then
mean,
I'm not inspired by MASC all
no,
the
I mean,
time.
by the way, I mean, I'll tell you an example. I mean, we looked
And
at
I'm
that.
being a smartass, but
No, I
go
mean,
ahead.
when we looked at the field trip policy, we said, oh, do we like
Yeah.
what MASC has?
Right.
We didn't. And we actually
Right.
went back and we made some modifications to our policy as opposed to adopting the
Yeah.
model policy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, at the end of the day.
Policies have to work for Wakefield. MASC
Right.
does terrific
Yeah.
work. MASS does terrific work in providing guidance and guardrails. And if it doesn't work for us, doesn't meet what our needs are, then we want to.
Yeah, I mean,
Modify.
there's another, there is a, you know, the other thing you could do with that conduct thing is you could literally reference just the Mass General Law and be done. I mean, that is if you go to the law, it does say we have to do X, Y, and Z, and there is a version of the MASC policy that has no content other than a reference to the paragraph from the MGL doc that's linked at the bottom. I mean,
We could just take out the reference in the policy to reference a code of conduct. That is an option.
It is.
So-
That was discussed at the time.
Yeah. But
I'm always afraid of politicizing a professional code of conduct.
What does
Yep.
that mean?
What do you
Yep.
mean?
I mean that, you know, we're lucky enough on the school committee to have teachers and former teachers on our school committee right now, but once we politicize a code of conduct for teachers, for paraprofessionals, for custodians, it requires politicians to have a deeper understanding of those jobs than I think is necessary. And when I see politicians creating codes of conduct, I think of Florida, I think of Oklahoma, and those don't feel right to me.
Who are the politicians? You mean us?
well,
Yeah.
technically, yes.
Yes.
You guys.
Okay, got it.
So,
Yeah, I think
so
that's a
let me
fair-
ask a
that's
question.
fair
Does we do have employees that don't, does every employee have a contract even if they're not in a union?
so they either have a collective bargaining
Yep.
unit contract or they have a non-rep contract.
Okay, so in a
Correct.
non-rep contract employee, I'll
Correct.
take, you know, Mr. Lyons, Dr.
Yeah.
Lyons over here.
There's a
Is there
reference to conduct.
Conduct,
Yes.
and is the conduct described in there, or does it reference this policy that doesn't?
I think there's a reference to good conduct, right? And so just to be clear here, the GBEB, the model policy, right? So I just want to read this so people have a flavor for this, right? In the area of personal conduct, comma, the committee expects, the school committee expects, right, that staff and others will conduct themselves in a manner that not only reflects credit to the school district, but also sets forth model worthy of emulation by students. I mean, I think that's happening every single day and across the district. I think we described it tonight with data, with percentages, with student feedback. Staff members have a responsibility to familiarize themselves and abide by the laws and regulations set forth by the state as these affect their work. The policies of the school committee and the procedures designated to implement them, right? And so, I mean, this is
That's like the first two paragraphs or sentences.
my gosh, right? I mean, so I don't. So, but this is the model policy, right? So, we've kind of taken this and we've added to it, and so, but if we need to modify it, let's modify it, right? And it makes reference to, legal reference 37H, right, or 37H, which is an important MGL citation. But I'm again happy to take any feedback to improve.
Yeah.
But I just don't want to get into this binary space of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Or what are we trying to solve? What we're trying to solve is we're trying to have a reference. There have been references in the past. I've been here 10 years. There's been references for 10 years made to a staff conduct policy. We don't have one. So we're just trying to create one. And so when I say they're aspirational, it's not inspirational. It's just really in line with what we want people to be cognizant and aware of as employees of WPS. We have 600 employees, right? We want people to be responsible and familiarize themselves and abide by the laws and regulations set forth by the state. For the committee to say that, I mean, what happens if someone didn't and their defense was, I was not familiar with the Mass General Law? Okay, as a committee, we probably should say you should familiarize yourself with important MGL laws, right? I mean, especially the ones that kind of align with your work, right? When it says things.
Yeah.
So I'm completely losing where you're going with this. So if I'm out of line, please, I'll just slow down.
So ignorance of the law is not an excuse for violation of the law. So I'm not sure that I'm, right? I mean, that's law 101. I also think that I can be inspired toward an aspiration.
Okay.
So, the two things that you read from this, Doug, they're bland enough and they're rather obvious enough, and I get it. But then there's a couple other things, relationships between staff should be characterized by fairness, openness, and respect. Politeness and respect are essential ingredients. These dig a little deeper than.
Do we not want that? I guess that's where I'm concerned, if it's a wordsmithing thing or.
Again, I'm getting back to my first question, is what are we trying to solve? Those words, to me, are saying we're trying to solve a problem. That's what those words say.
Okay.
Being aware of what the law is rather bland. All in, got it. Okay. Saying that the committee expects that staff will conduct themselves in a manner that's worthy of emulation by students. Easy peasy, got it. All in. But when we get down to, politeness and respect and how we're going to deal with differences should be dealt with calmly and fairly, these are fairly subjective.
I actually, it's 10 o'clock, but, okay, but I actually hate that second paragraph. I actually have less problem with it. Yeah.
The emulation piece?
Okay, I go into school tomorrow, and I have to set forth a model worthy of emulation. I have to be that high of a standard. I have to be emulated by my students, like 100. I mean, that's a pretty high bar for an expectation. I think that's
fair enough.
Now this is aspirational. I get it, but this is a codes of conduct are not aspirational.
So, but if you took out
it's a code of conduct.
emulation,
Emulation strong.
Yeah.
but if you took out emulation, you don't understand that you're a model for students?
Yeah, but the expectation for any employee, for a police officer, for a fireman to be, you must be emulated by your constituents. I mean, that's a high bar for any human being, for any career.
So,
I do not think that that's an expectation.
Right.
For a workplace expectation.
But you didn't answer the question. The question that I asked is, if we took out emulation, and we're asking that you come in and set forth you be a model for students. You can't. That's.
So I guess the question, Pete, for you is, with the feedback, is it a wordsmithing issue, or is it we don't want this policy, get it out of here?
I guess that's the question.
I like respect.
Because we could wordsmith all night, but what's the?
I'm going to dig into this one more.
What's the purpose?
One on
What are
many.
we trying
Well, we
to
had
solve?
said that the purpose was that we've been asked.
I mean, there was bold text that effectively said, like, these types of terms need to be bargained. I'll probably get the terminology wrong, but I think the reality is, at the end of the day, none of this actually matters with regards to our union members, because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is their bargaining agreement, right? I mean.
Evaluation, supervision, contract.
Well, I think all of our policy matters.
There's staff members that aren't covered by the union.
But they have their own.
So, but I think all of our policies matter. So I don't know that I can agree to that on its face, right? So all of our policies matter. They're in place for a reason, and it is the responsibility of the committee to either put them up or put them down, right? So if the committee wants to have a staff conduct policy for all staff, right?
All right,
Great.
so I think we've talked about this a bunch. I think we should just go back to you're going to revisit this.
Yep.
I would implore anyone that has sort of comment on this to include, we shouldn't have this, should reach out to to policy, Pete specifically.
Yep.
And when we come back, it will be a different thing that's probably in front of us right now. And then we can talk about whether or not it is inspirational or aspirational. And, or both. And if we,
But
if we need it as a tool.
So the committee has no direction on this then?
the committee has the,
To create a policy that's going to be voted up or down at a later date.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, here's
Because
a-
as it exists now, the language is not favorable. We've already said that that's going to
Duly
get
noted.
resubmitted.
Duly
One
noted.
topic that came up is whether or not we need it, or if we're trying to solve a problem that does not exist.
Right.
I think that can be a discussion, but
Yeah.
I think what's in front of us right now is not something that everybody is comfortable with, and so Pete's
Here's the
going to
thing,
do a
none of
little.
the members, as I said, of our subcommittee drafted this policy. It was drafted multiple years ago before any of us in the subcommittee were even part of the school committee. So
Yeah.
I do think with the negative feedback we received and the feedback tonight, I'm going to continue to collect it and we'll revisit. I mean, as I
Appreciate
said,
it.
we could have the most watered down policy that references MGL, and says refer to your employment contract or bargaining agreement or whatever for other terms and conditions. I mean, who knows what will come out of it? Well, let us.
Except that MGL says the superintendent of every school district shall publish the district's policies pertaining to the conduct of teachers and students.
Well, so that answers the question of why we have this policy, because it's required by Mass General Law, right?
It's cyclical. Yeah, okay. Well, looking forward to it at a future date. Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Melissa.
You're welcome.
Can I talk to you about any more policy?
I'm also happy to take feedback.
Yes, I thought you were working on policy book stuff, like C and F.
I am.
Okay. All right. Any liaison reports? Okay.
I have one.
Oh, Melissa, yes.
The youth council met tonight, and they are doing some really great work. They're continuing their work on the Angels program, which, if you're not familiar with it, they pair students with seniors who might need help shoveling during snowstorms, and they have really a great number of people that have reached out to them, both students and seniors. So I think that's
great.
going to go well once there's actual snow to be had. They're also continuing to work on creating a service project to run in conjunction with the HRC in honor of Martin Luther King Day. I'm not entirely sure what it's going to be exactly. They're still kind of working that out, or when exactly it's going to be, but keep your eye out for it in January. We'll try and get some publication around that. We have 2 members of the youth council that will be shadowing the school committee, so they'll be working with me a little bit, but I'm gonna probably contact you guys if they have special interests in some of the other subcommittees, like labor relations, or budget. Who knows, Tom? Maybe finance is gonna have a high schooler.
That'd be great. Love it.
Yep. And then they're continuing their research on trying to come up with a plan for voting rights for 16 to 18-year-olds in municipal elections here in Wakefield.
That is cool. That came up in when we joined Aaron Creasos's civics class, did it not?
Mm-hmm. It did, yep.
That's cool.
It's something that they've done in Oakland. It's something that will be particularly interesting if the national conversation about having staff at schools be elected is something that actually ever happens, which I hope I would be surprised if that's the case.
Staff at school be elected?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's been
What type of
about-
staff? Do tell.
Principals and assistant principals.
It's gonna be like the mayor,
Right.
The sheriff.
How fun would that be?
Well, yeah, by
16-year-olds.
I ran for principal.
Yep.
Awesome.
It'd be particularly interesting since in Massachusetts you can't actually raise money to run if you work in school. So that was all really good information, and the kids are doing a great job.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Item number 10, future dates and agenda items. Our next school committee will be after the holidays, Tuesday, January 7th. Same bat time. Any agenda items?
So just as a reminder, policy book C and F, let's make sure we have motions and put those back in the book for the next school committee meeting.
You got my email. Okay. Anyone else? Future agenda? No? Okay. Any school committee comments? Dr. Piscadla.
Just really, really quickly, I saw it in the item as well as WCAT posted. Gail Lowe had passed away. And if anyone's ever read the item, she was a really gifted writer. Short stories, columns, different things like that. But related to our work here, she was the reporter that often during my first couple terms was reporting on our meetings. And she was a joy to work with, particularly when you were chair, because she would always call you the next day for either follow-up or quotes, and she was always under deadline, so she needed you to call right back because they were on top of her because of deadline. But she was a really great woman and enjoyed working with her, so just thinking about her and her family at this time. And then last, you mentioned our next meeting's after the holidays, so just want to wish all of you, everyone in the community, and certainly our staff, students, faculty, just a nice restful break. Happy holidays if they celebrate any, and just look forward to coming back in the new year and continuing our work.
Yeah.
So,
Great.
wish you all well.
Thank you. Pete?
In today's item was the obituary for our dear friend Judy. Her celebration of life will be on Friday at noon at, help me with the name of this. Forest Glade Cemetery. And so the information is in the item and also online.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anything else?
Just an echo of what's been said, and happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year all.
Kev? Nope. Okay. I would just want to say I also had with the NEASC accreditation piece, I also had a chance to sit down with the auditors that came in and spoke, and I just wanted to share that they gave me some feedback as sort of a school committee person, as a person in the community, is how impressed they were with our district. Sort of that vertical alignment through all schools, through all levels of the district. It seems like we're working towards a common purpose, and that we talked a little bit about the Pitch River graduate, and it was just great to hear someone from outside. Both of the auditors are from Western Mass, so they're out near Amherst and in that area. But it's just nice to see hear people sort of give you feedback on the district, the place where sort of maybe where you're on a school committee or where your kids go to school, and you can hear them talk so positively after having visited all these other schools about sort of how your district functions. And so sort of just my appreciation to all of the teachers, all of the educators, all the administrators that make that thing happen. And also sort of just to school committee knowing that like that support, what I heard was that it runs all the way through. And that's what that's their feedback from what they're hearing across the district. So it's nice to know that there's that cohesion for sort of the betterment of Wakefield kids. So thank you for that. I'm glad I got to take part. Happy holidays, and I think we'll see everybody in the new year. I think we have a motion for adjournment.
Yeah. Move that the school committee adjourn its meeting of Tuesday, December 10th, 2024.
Second. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor? Thank you.
Happy holidays,
Have a good night.
everybody.
Good night, have a pleasant tomorrow.